Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Movie Mates podcast. I am Matthew, joined by my wonderful co-host and best friend.
Callum.
Hey man, great to see you. So today we're back with another podcast episode, and in a similar vein to our Back to the Future episodes and our Terminator episodes, we're trying to, as we said before in the podcast, we're trying to tick off as many of the big hitters as we can. So we're back today with another huge franchise, Indiana Jones. So I'm going to pass over to my best friend here to explain what movies we're going to be talking about today. So Callum, off to you, my friend.
Yes, so as we all know, Indiana Jones 5 coming out in 2022. So we wanted to get ahead of the situation, talk
Absolutely.
about these films as soon as we could. I've never seen any of these films, so I was sort of looking forward to
Me too.
establishing this retroactive nostalgia.
Absolutely.
At least that was the
Absolutely.
intention. To sort of get in the game, even if it was probably a few years too late. So we'll be starting, of course, with Raiders of the Lost Ark, moving on to Temple of Doom, uh, then The Last Crusade, and then Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
Awesome, man. And you know what it is? I always thought Raiders was the sequel because, strangely enough, and we'll mention this in the podcast, Temple of Doom is sort of a retroactive prequel of sorts. So it's sort of that I was weird because obviously you hear a lot about Raiders as being one of the best films of all time and one of the most iconic films of all time, but we will get into our thoughts on it, man. I'm really excited for this one. I think it's gonna be a good one, hopefully.
I think you'll have some hot takes on what the best film is because you
Yeah,
told me
man.
what your favorite one was yesterday.
It's it's I don't know because again I'm looking forward to this
Well,
because
if your opinion's changed since yesterday, then that means that your favorite might be Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, which you're definitely gonna get shit for.
you know what I'll keep the viewers waiting. Increase
Oh
the
yeah,
watch
leave them
time.
in suspense.
Exactly, man. But yeah, as Callum said, those are the four films we're going to be talking about today. As always, thank you so much for watching today. Please be sure to like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, and email us at moviematespodcast@gmail.com. That will be in the description. And yeah, man, shall we crack on with Raiders then? Yeah,
Yeah, sure.
let's do it.
So I've had a lot of expectations for this film, and we'll sort of talk about a little bit about the character of Indiana Jones in just a few minutes because we sort of
Sure.
see both sides of his character. Uh, but one big expectation I had of the film was that sort of the scene in which he switches out the idol for a bag of sand and then is chased by the boulder. I had this weird expectation that that would be one of the bigger set pieces, and I was
Yeah,
thankfully subverted. Because I find that such an iconic scene. Where he's chased by the boulder, and I feel like had that been like a huge action set piece that like the film was building to, I would have been really disappointed because I would have
absolutely.
been like, I've seen it already.
Absolutely. And it's so interesting you mentioned that, buddy, because this film is just full of iconic scenes. And we'll get into them more. But and I do agree with you, like the boulder chase scene is like hyped up to be like the pinnacle of Indiana Jones. And I am happy because it's sort of like a very minor really point in the film, really. There's I would say it's probably one of the more shorter action set pieces of the film, certainly. So yeah, I'm glad they subverted that, buddy, completely.
Yes, and in this film, Indiana Jones, right from the off, is presented as this genius adventurer. Uh, you know, he uh, he gets the job done, but then we see
Absolutely.
the slowest exchange of the sandbag for the idol, and he's like, you just see him looking at the sandbag and then at the idol, go like, I fucking nailed this, and then the
Yeah.
boulder comes, and I'm
Yeah.
like, yeah, you deserve this, and we'll sort of talk about the morality of the character. I mean, now if you wish,
Sure, go
uh,
for it.
because in my opinion, kind of deserves to die. Because I don't really see how people like find theft and desecration of tombs heroic. Because I've always had this expectation of the character to be this huge heroic, like not even a lovable rogue, like just a nice guy. And he seems to have a really great personality, but pretty much no moral code. And I suppose we'll talk about this in the Last Crusade because it turns out that from a very early age he's been saying like, we've got to put this shit in the museum. And I don't really see the moral.
I
He
get you.
seems
I
to have
get
a
you.
moral high ground, which I thoroughly disagree with, honestly.
I know what you mean, buddy, and I think that's probably why like the Nazis are the villains for two of these films, and that's maybe to suggest that like yeah, the director and the filmmakers, they understand that Indy's not like he is quite a morally ambiguous character, or morally condemnable. So maybe that's why they went for like the extreme evil as the villains. Do you know what I mean? To sort of like balance that out and disguise how morally questionable Indy is. And also, we see in Last Crusade, and we'll mention it there as well, about Indy's experience with grave robbers and stuff, and they're sort of portrayed as the bad guys, and it's sort of interesting how Indy is sort of the same thing in his adulthood, but it's sort of heroic, like you said. It's a strange one.
Yeah, I think it's probably down to audience perception because, there's sort of the character of Han Solo, who people consider a lovable rogue,
Yeah,
and at least the Harrison Ford interpretation, I think is just a genuinely good guy. He's
yeah,
sort of, he's sort of in a few ways forced into the position of hero, but when he's in it, he's comfortable and he's a great guy.
yeah,
But this character, I mean, he's just well, like one, he's doing the discoveries and the excavations and the research for money,
yeah.
and two, he's doing it to put the things in a museum. But you're stealing it from a tribe or a culture that
It's a
where
good point.
that might be their idol, that might be the thing that's most important to their culture. Like we see in Temple of Doom that when the stone is stolen from the village, everything turns to ruin. And maybe every time that he goes to collect an artifact, he's doing that to a different culture every
Yeah,
single time.
yeah. It's a great point. And it's like we've covered quite a few Harrison Ford movies on the channel. Blade Runner, obviously Star Wars, and now this. And I don't know, that I think this is by far Harrison Ford's most comfortable role. I think this is where he feels the most comfortable as an actor. I think in Han Solo, it's more of a more of a forced performance, and the same for Decker in Blade Runner. So I think this is personally my favorite Harrison Ford character, just because I think he's so natural and like in the charm. It is quite similar to Han Solo, but I think I prefer Indy more. What about yourself, mate?
Yeah, I do agree with you. He's sort of, he's smiling a lot. He has a nice personality. I don't agree with his code of ethics,
Yeah,
but aside from that, I think he seems like a great guy, and I think that's all down to Harrison Ford being incredibly charming.
absolutely, man,
And
absolutely.
we'll talk about him being an absolute smooth operator later
Oh,
on.
absolutely, especially in Temple of Doom.
Oh yeah. No, there's a little bit, there's a taste here. We'll talk
Oh
about that
yeah,
near the end.
oh yeah,
So we've talked a lot about perception of the character, and in the we've always assumed that he would be a heroic character, and we as adults maybe question that a bit more than people who saw this in their childhood and have good memories of this, like Han Solo-ish, sort of lovable rogue, or
yeah,
even just a straight out hero. And
sure,
we have some issues with that. But one big assumption I had of the character. And I was aware that he was a professor, that he was part-time professor, part-time adventurer. But they also sort of present him as like a bumbling nerd whenever he's a professor, and I'm
yeah.
kind of confused because they sort of present it as this weird like Clark Kent Superman like
Alter ego
dichotomy.
vibe.
Yeah, it's like an alter ego vibe, but he has no like he has no identity to keep secret because everyone seems to know who Indiana Jones is. Like it's weird, like he's regarded as a quote unquote like uh famous or famous archaeologist. So like he goes to foreign countries and people like shake his hand and go, "Oh, Dr. Jones, I know you." So
Yeah,
he's very well regarded. People know that he's an adventurer. So like,
yeah.
what's he hiding? Or are they both equally his personality, but it's just kind of like bizarrely like two different sides of the spectrum?
I had the exact same point, buddy, especially in Last Crusade. And it's sort of like, you know, I had the point, I think, in that when we reviewed that movie about how, how is Indy able to resume like a normal life. I'm amazed that he's still a professor and he's not like touring the world sharing his incredible stories, because it's weird that he
Or
still has
in
like,
prison?
or in prison, exactly. Yeah, like he's still like a normal day. He still like has a normal day job, and we like it is so weird because he is like a bumbling nerd, but also like there's like students who have like written like "love you" on their eyelids, which is so strange. That are like flirting with him. But yeah,
Yeah.
like it's such a weird like alter ego sort of, and I don't know, man. Like it sort of feels like two different characters almost.
Yeah, which I suppose is impressive in his performance, but I mean, what is the word? Characterly? Like, what is, uh,
Like
you know,
yeah,
in the sense of the character, it seems a bit confused.
yeah, it
Uh,
does.
I just don't understand. Harrison Ford is obviously great in both sides of the role. But I mean, it makes sense for him to be a professor by day, adventurer by other parts of the day. But it seems weird to me that he would have two different personalities when in both professions people know he has the other one, so he has nothing to hide. So I guess he is just being genuine, and I guess you
Yeah.
know I I would say maybe the professor side is his true personality, and then he gets like more like suave and brave when he's in the adventuring environment to sort of to exude this air of confidence that's
Yeah.
maybe not true.
Yeah, that's a great way of looking at it, buddy. I actually agree with you completely. And credit to Harrison Ford. This is a fantastic performance throughout the films, and I'm a huge fan of the character in general. Like it, and we sort of talked about like retroactive nostalgia with Back to the Future, and I'm the sort of same with these films. Like not having watched them, it feels like I've had them all my life.
Yeah, yeah. I really had a blast watching these films,
Absolutely.
and
There's not a bad one of the bunch,
but
really.
yeah, no, I had a hugely great time with each one in their own separate ways.
Yeah,
We'll probably talk about our least favorite ones. Can you hear that?
I can't hear it now.
No, okay, good. It was a Hoover. But okay.
No worries.
Uh, yeah. So we talked about the two sides of his personality,
Yeah,
but how to what degree can you pretend? Because if he's putting on the Indiana Jones adventurer personality to sort of to like put on a brave face in front of his enemies, then like how is he still like a smooth ladies man like when he's Indiana Jones adventurer?
yeah. I know it's a weird one, man. It's a weird one, and like it seems like the character of Indius is able to like switch that on and off all the time, and it is a strange one, man. It's a strange one, and like I think maybe like the Indiana Jones characters is one where I think they took a lot from Han Solo, especially, and maybe a little too much because they are strikingly similar in the way they exude their confidence and the way they are in the action scenes. Han Solo's smooth ladies man, Indiana Jones smooth ladies man. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I suppose both were created by George Lucas,
Yeah.
and George Lucas like said of this character that he didn't want to make Harrison Ford like his Robert De Niro,
Hmm.
because Martin Scorsese basically cast Robert De Niro in every one of his films, and George Lucas basically he cast Harrison Ford in American Graffiti, and then he said, I don't want to have anybody in Star Wars that was in American Graffiti, and then Harrison Ford was just so great he had to cast him, and then he was like, okay, I'm gonna do Indiana Jones, but I'm not casting Harrison Ford. And then
Yeah.
he's like, oh shit, he's the best guy for the job.
Yeah.
And of course he is. Like
Yeah.
he's so amazing in this role.
Absolutely, and we'll talk about potential actors succeeding him in the role later on, I suppose. But yeah, on the like Scorsese De Niro dynamic, do you think that's a criticism that you can make about Scorsese and his filmmaking? Like he's too heavily reliant on certain actors. We've seen that with Tarantino before. With his recasting of Brad Pitt and Leonardo DiCaprio and Samuel L. Jackson. Do you think that's maybe them just resting on their laurels too much, or it's like, okay, we know they can give a good performance, I'm going to be lazy about it and recast them? Or do you think it's a matter of, oh no, like they know they're good at acting? Because I think it can go both ways. I do. I think it works for both.
Yeah, I think it's probably in the majority of like I basically discovered this person, it like all I want to always be giving them work so that they
Yeah,
keep working, but also they give an amazing performance. They've won like constant Oscars for me, for my films, and
yeah,
they're the most incredible actor I've ever seen. Of course, I'm going to keep casting them. And often is the case, like I assume with Martin Scorsese, is that he writes parts with Robert De Niro in mind. So it's not like he's, just being like, oh, I'll arbitrarily put him in the film.
yeah.
A role has been written for him.
Yeah, no, that's interesting, man. That's interesting. I'd love to cover Scorsese movies on the. I mean, we have covered King of Comedy, but I'd love to cover more Scorsese movies with you because I think he's a really interesting director.
Yeah, Taxi Driver is probably one of the biggest ones on my
Oh
movie
yeah,
bucket list.
definitely,
So
man.
I'd love to
Definitely.
talk about that sometime soon.
Awesome. Yeah.
So we sort of talk about a lot of action heroes and how they sort of they survive by dumb luck, and that is quite abundant here,
Yeah.
especially in later movies, especially like Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. He should be dead, but this sort of balance as well, the fact that he's actually exceptionally competent in this film.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I picked up on this in sort of the bar fight, in the like in
Mhm.
Marion's saloon, where sort of everything's on fire, but he's managing to, keep everything going. He's shooting guys and sort of relying on Marion to take out other guys. There was a great sense of competence in it.
Absolutely, buddy. And we'll talk about like how many chances the Nazis have to kill Indy throughout these films and stuff. But no, you are right. Like he's very competent in the action scenes, and the fact that the action is so sort of set piece orientated, there's no real CGI, is credit to Harrison Ford and the stunt team. Really, it's fantastic stuff. And you know, some of the punches here, they are very fake. That there's clear like huge gaps, like they go past like that, but that's a minority, to be
And
honest.
like a
Like
kathunk sound
I
effect.
think, yeah, I think that adds to the aura of the film. In a similar sense to the Batman films of the '60s. The clash bang wallop sort of vibes. I really like that here. And one of my favorite scenes in the movie is probably one of the more iconic scenes along with the boulders, when like the guy's just like going about with a sword like this here, and Indy's just like, I just love that. That's so good.
Yeah, and do you know why they shot it like that?
I don't know. No.
Apparently, like Harrison Ford had dysentery and he couldn't do any like complex
Oh,
fighting
really?
techniques. So it
Okay.
was just his suggestion, like, can I just pull out a gun and shoot him?
I like
Like, I,
that.
re- I
I
really
like
don't
that.
want to have to fight with knives and shit.
Yeah, that's a good piece of movie trivia, man. That's one of my favorites. That's great.
Yeah, and we sort of talked about the moral questions around Indy,
Hmm.
and I would say the biggest one is that he is neither a police officer nor 007, but he is just going around killing people,
Yeah.
with no consequences.
Yeah, and I think and like you mentioned 007 there, I think that's definitely an inspiration for the character as well. And but you're all right, like he does cross a lot of moral lines there and kills a lot of dudes, like not just Nazis, like he kills a lot of guys. And like
Yeah,
one thing I wanted to ask you about this movie, I know, we've watched The Big Bang Theory. We're a huge fan of that. I think you'll know where I'm going here. And there's an episode of The Big Bang Theory where they debunk Raiders of the Lost Ark, and I wanted to know, like, can you shed any light on that? Because I don't know exact details, but it was something about Indy's role in the film has no relevance to the end results. Is that the case?
yeah. I mean, I remember the episode. I don't really remember the situation, but I think they said pretty much that if he didn't interject, the Nazis would have got the Ark faster, and then they still would have had their faces melted off. So like him being in the situation only like didn't delay the inevitable and probably got more people killed, I guess.
Yeah.
Which is probably it's probably a fair point. But if he hadn't been involved, then like they found the sunroom, but he was the one that had the medallion, and he was the one that was able to get it deciphered, and then he found the sunroom, and then he got the staff, and then he found the location of the Ark, and then recovered the Ark. So I suppose if he hadn't entered the situation, the Nazis would have killed Marion, taken the medallion, got that deciphered, and then probably would have gone about the same way, and then
Yeah.
had their faces melted off. So yeah, I suppose he doesn't pose any help. But then if he's not there to sort of recover it and then bring it back to America, where it
Mhm.
goes to Area 51, then it's just it in Egypt, like for anyone to open and melt their face off. So he's still a positive influence, I think.
Yeah, like I had saw another plot hole with this film, and I don't want to get into plot holes because this is a fantastic movie, but I thought it was interesting. And someone had said, um, in this film, the Nazis are able to, employ a lot of archaeologists and like excavators in Egypt, which was a British-owned colony at the time, which I thought was really
Hmm.
interesting. Like it was a British-owned land, and the Nazis are just roaming about everywhere. I thought it was interesting. I don't know. I mean, it doesn't really. I don't really care about that because it doesn't really like add or take away from enjoyment of the film. I just thought it was an interesting wee loop.
Yeah, and I got a bit like shifty-eyed when I saw them like walking around with swastikas and stuff, and I was like, "Wow, you're really not even trying to be subtle." But
Hmm.
then you sort of have to take into consideration that this is in 1936, which is pre-war,
Yeah.
so people probably didn't know about their military capabilities. So they were just aware of them being interested in sort of like odd scientific research. I mean, obviously, Hitler would research a lot of strange stuff to do with genetic capabilities of certain people,
Yeah,
and that became an obsession of him, especially with his his interpretation of what he called the Aryan race.
yeah,
So yeah, it was. I think they were just regarded as very, very strange scientists
yeah,
at that time. So I suppose it was still comprehensible that
yeah. That's a good
they
point,
could have
man.
been in that territory. But they're also going around blatantly murdering people. So surely people would then make the association that they are, you know, morally reprehensible characters.
Yeah, man, and I guess it's an interesting one because it was weird seeing this film because like the Nazi like memorabilia, so to speak, is just so apparent. And can you still show like the swastika and stuff in movies these days, or does it have to be censored?
I mean, I suppose you can whenever it's acting as a critique. Obviously, you can't make like a Nazi propaganda film and then release
Yeah,
that to the mainstream media because no one would release that if it was a pro-Nazi film.
yeah,
So yeah, I suppose provided it's acting as a critique or satire, yeah, it's probably it's probably
cool.
admissible.
Yeah, that's interesting, man. That's interesting. But like, I'm just happy to go by any remarks you had left to say, buddy.
Yeah, so we sort of in our introduction to Marion, she's seen trying to outdrink one of her bar patrons, and then that sort of comes back in a fun way whenever she's trying to uh, escape the Nazi prison. And I just thought it was I just thought it was a really fun callback, even though she
Yeah.
wasn't successful.
Absolutely, man. I actually really like the Marion character. Like, she's very competent as well, and we'll talk about like the differences between Marion and Willie in the next film. But no, I'm a huge fan of her. Actually, I'm glad they brought her back for Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
Yeah, and we'll sort of talk about the initial intentions of the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull script,
Hmm.
because initially certain things weren't meant to happen. We'll not spoil anything until we're into that review.
Yeah,
But sort of near the end of the film, uh after Indy has recovered the Ark of the Covenant, he's locked in the tomb, and I suppose they thought that was poetic, but then they like throw Marion in there, and you've just given him an assistant to help him escape. You
yeah,
know, I suppose they were just like once again, like Indy, like we're fucking geniuses, and we sort
yeah,
of see that that's sort of an instance of him surviving by dumb luck, which we also see in Temple of Doom at the beginning, and we'll get into that. But that is an instance of if they really just went by their instinct and just shot him in the head, he's obviously not coming back from that.
yeah.
So he's just lucky that people are fully aware of his reputation. People are like, oh, you did this job here and blah blah blah. You recovered this artifact, so he's incredibly capable. So why are you giving him like ample opportunity to screw you over?
I know. Like in every film, they like tie him up or capture him with another person. Like we see in the Last Crusade, he's like tied up back to back with his dad in a chair, which gives them room to escape. But no, I do agree with you, buddy. It's a bit silly.
Yeah, with ropes like just around his wrist and like ropes that he can just like pull over his head and
Yeah,
take off.
exactly. Exactly, man, exactly.
Like someone is getting shot by their boss
Oh
for
yeah,
such a shit job.
big time, man, big time. Like the amount of brutal deaths in this film is remarkable. There's so much great ones. Like there's a snake pit. Oh, I would hate that in real life. Hate snakes, man. And no, there's just so many like fantastic deaths. Like we'll get all into them in later films. I think they just get better. But no, I just love like the brutality of this film. Like it's absolutely horrific in some instances, especially the face melting scene. So well done.
I would say that there's maybe five or six shots of the film where I sort of like where I was like, ooh, that has not aged well. Especially it's sort of like a lot of weather shots where you're like, oh, they're on a green
Oh,
screen.
like the lightning,
Where
yeah, yeah,
yeah, the lightning, where it could literally just be filmed outside. It's a normal night, and like there does not need to be lightning, or you
yeah.
could just do like be outside and then do lightning effects. That could be okay, but then they've CGI created like the entire sky,
I know
and it looks shit.
it does look
And
bad.
there's maybe five or six instances of that, and then I was like, but what hasn't aged is that face melting effect. It
So
looks
good, man.
amazing.
Looks fantastic. It's probably my favorite visual uh in the film actually, and I suppose they recall it back in Last Crusade, in a sort of cool way as well. But no, it's fantastic, buddy. It really is stellar.
Yes, and we're sort of talking about the capabilities of the Ark of the Covenant, and this is an ancient relic, unlike anything ever discovered. And we sort of see, obviously even more dangerous relics recovered in a few films down the line. But I mean, be a bit more elaborate, have decoys or something, because I mean, there's a truck that's just driving out with the Ark in it, and that Indiana Jones is still alive. So then he starts like chasing it on horseback, I believe, at that point. And then is that film? I don't know. So
Yeah, there's
some of
like a
the
truck
action scenes
chase
sort of
scene.
blend
Yeah,
together
yeah,
because
yeah.
there is always, well, Matthew, there's always a truck chase
It's a good
scene.
point. It's a good
I'm just
point.
like I'm just like I'm not 100% confident of which one it is. I think it's the one where he's on horseback, because then they're sort of in that desert area whenever he like threatens to blow it up with a bazooka.
Yeah.
So he gets a hold of the Ark just by taking over that one truck, and then sort of like crashing into everybody else.
Yeah.
So I mean, that other people are alive. That other people are chasing this. Every adventurer at the time is gonna have knowledge of that whole situation. They're gonna be after the Ark. Do like
Absolutely.
2 or 3 decoys.
Absolutely.
Put
Yeah, yeah.
some effort into it. Do something.
Yeah, I know, and it's a big cliche in these films that like Indy is kept alive and there's no like decoys and stuff, and also like an adventurer who's pals with Indy, or you think that betrays him. At the beginning of the film, one of my favorite lines is when uh his I think he's like I don't know where he's from, but I think he's got like a Spanish accent, and he goes
It's Alfred Molina, by the way.
is that Alfred? Because I saw he was in this film, but I couldn't pick what character that was. He looks totally different in my opinion.
Yeah, yeah. I never would have guessed, because I suppose I just wasn't paying enough attention, and I had no idea that it was him. So
Yeah,
I don't even know what he looked like in this film because I genuinely wasn't paying any attention. And then I read that and was hugely
yeah.
surprised.
It's just when he turns around to Indy and he goes, "Adios, senor," and then just dies. I love that.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's such a prick to him, to Indy, but he probably deserves it. Honestly, he
Oh
doesn't
yeah.
really deserve good friends, especially when he's being his like dickhead adventurer side of his personality. Because
Absolutely, man.
I just don't think he's a moral or ethical dude. So I
I
mean,
respect that, buddy. I respect that.
I have a lot of problems with what he does, and I assume that it's probably like being nitpicky to be like, oh, I don't like it. I don't like his code of ethics.
No, I
People are like,
agree with you, man. I don't think it's
that what makes
nitpicky. I
him
think
so
you're
good.
spot on.
But I'm not saying that makes him a bad character that I don't enjoy to watch. It's just like I don't ethically side with him. That doesn't create an issue. It doesn't make me want to watch the film less. And
I
I'm not
respect
gonna
that,
rate
buddy.
it lower because of the character they present. Because I honestly think it's just audience perception of him being heroic. I think, as you said, the film recognizes that what he's doing isn't always okay.
I think you've hit the nail on the head there, Callum. I agree with everything you said, and I think it's a fair criticism of the character, and maybe it's intentional. The remains to be seen.
Yeah, and sort of after we talked about the truck chase, they think they've got away safely. Indy's quite injured. They're on the boat, and then as we mentioned, the sexy smooth operator pointing to everything on his body that isn't hurt and getting that sneaky kiss from Marion.
Classic,
Uh,
classic, man.
yeah, that made me uncomfortable.
Um, the next film, Temple of Doom, it gets worse, but arguably better. Like the humor in these films, I think it's very similar to Sam Raimi's humor in the Raimi trilogy. Like it's sort of like cringy, but also kind of works humor. I don't know. Maybe that was an inspiration. It remains to be seen. But no, I think it was quite funny. Though I was uncomfortable.
Yeah, I think that this one is meant to be more like sexy and sweet, and then the Temple of Doom one is meant to be more like borderline creepy, kind of like
Yeah,
cringe humor. But I
yeah,
mean, they're sort of like both giving as much as they're getting. So I mean, you can't really blame one or the other as being outright creepy. You would assume it's Indiana Jones, but I guess they probably hold equal blame if you can blame them.
yeah.
Uh, so then, the Nazis retrieve the Ark of the Covenant. They open it and discover that it's full of sand. And then, like, I don't know his name, but like the balding freak with like the bowler hat just starts laughing. And I'm like, if you feel Hitler, he's definitely gonna murder you. I don't know what you're laughing at.
Yeah,
Like, you
it
should
kind of
probably be
reminded me of
glad that you
like
got your
Arnim
face
Zola.
melted off. Yeah, he did kind of remind me of Arnim Zola. But I think that this guy, like at least Arnim Zola, you know, he was sort of a scientist. I believe he was like captured, and then he was just making the best of his situation,
Yeah,
and he was in essence a prisoner. But
yeah.
this guy seems to be fucking loving life.
Oh
But I
yeah,
mean,
I know.
honestly, I'd rather get my face melted off than have to go back to Germany and explain that I failed Hitler.
Tell me about it, bro. Tell me about it.
Not that I would ever do that,
Yeah,
because I
yeah,
would never be in that situation.
yeah. I've actually got nothing else really to say about this film. It's weird, like it's such a thrilling, fast-paced action flick, but I don't have a huge amount to say. You know, one thing that really upset me was when the poor monkey got poisoned. That really broke me.
Yeah, and it was sort of in that moment. I definitely thought that, like, I had a strong feeling that Salah, you know, his friend in Egypt, was going to betray him, and I
Yeah,
was
me
kind
too.
of, I was quite surprised that you know he just remains a consistent, good friend,
Oh,
you
likewise,
know,
man.
throughout the entire franchise.
Likewise,
So
buddy.
I was glad that he didn't let him take the poison. And we'll sort of talk about Indiana Jones being a fucking idiot when it comes to poison in Temple of Doom.
Oh, tell me about it,
But
brother.
yeah, here that was a big surprise. I only have a few further points.
Go for it, man.
Mostly that just the Nazis weren't at all dubious of, you know, how easily the Ark was procured. You know, they talk about this as, you know, the most you know, religious artifact that there is on Earth. You know, it holds the power of God,
Sure.
and then, you know, and then they're not surprised that there weren't any booby traps. You know, there were some snakes on the floor, and but I mean, if Indiana Jones, one man, was able to recover this, you know, historically significant artifact, you're not at all suspicious. You know,
Yeah.
I wouldn't be opening it and expecting not to get my face melted off. You know, I like that would be my full expectation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like, you know, as a death, face melting off's pretty cool.
Yeah, we sort of talked about like what our preferred form of death would be in our Jurassic Park episode.
Check
Watch
that
that,
out.
kids. You'll enjoy that. Was it Jurassic Park or Jurassic World? I don't remember. Watch them both.
Watch them both.
But
Yeah.
either way, we talked about that. I think it was Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
And like we sort of said explosion. Provided you don't have like burns, you know, you just explode. So I
Yeah.
suppose face melting, not probably horrific for like, you know, fit like a few seconds, but I mean a good
Worth
story
it.
for other people to tell.
Exactly. Worth it, man.
Yeah, I mean, you know, obviously a real life situation where that happens, horrific. But I mean, opening like a religious artifact and then like it melting your face off,
Oh,
best
awesome.
story ever.
Best story
I mean,
ever.
you can't tell it obviously, but
Yeah.
best story
But
ever.
your friends can. Your friends can.
Yeah, your friend, like the American Indiana Jones.
Any other points from me, buddy?
We'll just sort of, you know, a wrap up of my thoughts on the situation.
Go
Just
for it.
really that I went in to the film with quite low expectations, and I was very pleasantly surprised.
Absolutely. It's quite you know, you hear a lot about these like classic films and you worry that they're overrated, but I think this one completely holds up. It has great rewatchability as well, and you know it's a great way to kick off the franchise.
Yeah, definitely. And I'd love to hear your rating of the film, Matthew.
So yeah, like we mentioned, great fast-paced action, fantastic villains as well, and fantastic performances. So I'd give it an 8.5 out of 10.
Great.
Yeah. What about
Yeah,
you,
I would
mate?
say I didn't love the film as I was watching it, but you know, after I took a few minutes afterwards to think about it, you know, I was writing out notes and then speaking to you about it. You know, I think I did really enjoy it, and you know, I recognize its importance and its significance and all those, you know, huge culturally important, you know, pop culturally important moments,
Hmm.
especially, you know, like where he shoots the guy with the knives, and you know, the rolling boulder in the face melting. You know, it gave so much to pop culture, and I think it has affected, you know, my perception of movies even without me having to have seen it,
Yeah.
in the same way that, you know, the Star Wars films did. Because I mean, we didn't, you know, watch the entire franchise, you know, start to finish until about 7 months ago. So you know, even getting to this later in life, I really loved it. So
That's
I
great,
will give
man.
it a 9 out of 10.
That's awesome, but I thought your review was very inspired. I loved it, and you know, it's a very important film in pop culture, which you mentioned. So you know, it'll definitely be a classic for years to come. I think.
Yeah, and I'm glad we got around to it.
Likewise, buddy. Likewise. So, did you want to head into a movie I didn't realize was a prequel until I watched it? Temple of Doom.
I mean, it's not even clear when you watch it because they never go, and the year is 1935.
Yeah.
I mean, is it said anywhere that it's a prequel? Because I didn't find out until I looked on Wikipedia, like as I started the film, and it
Yeah.
said, this film set in 1935, a year before Raiders of the Lost Ark. Is it said anywhere
It
in the film
must
that
be
it's a
in there
prequel?
somewhere, man, but I didn't recall it, like, personally.
Yeah, I mean, I've never seen a weirder decision than to make the second film in an like it was intended as a trilogy. So to make the second film in a trilogy a prequel is just bizarre because like we don't know the character well enough to wonder like, what adventures he had before. Like we're never like, we've only known the character for one film, so we're not like, oh, and where did this character start?
Yeah,
We
yeah,
don't know enough about him to like crave a prequel. And also we lose all the development that we saw in Raiders of the Lost Ark. So like all the development with Marion that he, has in that film, is just gone, and we're back to like the Indy before he like, resolved things with Marion. So he's still kind of a dickhead, like at least in regards to that relationship.
yeah,
So it's a very weird perception of it's a very weird interpretation of the character, and we'll sort of talk about the differences maybe later on about the difference between the character here in Temple of Doom and the character in Raiders. But they are kind of different, and in a very bizarre way for being a prequel. And also the introduction of characters is very weird, and we'll sort of get to that near the end maybe. But it's just
yeah.
bizarre.
I think
And I read that it was because Steven Spielberg didn't want to make the Nazis the villains of the film. But I mean, you can just set it in 1937 and there not be Nazis in it. Just
yeah,
because Nazis existed doesn't mean that they have to be a villain in every film at the time at which the Nazis existed. Because the India fuck my life the India fuck shit the Indiana Jones films are very famous for like globe trotting. He's going to Africa, he's going to Asia, he's going to all these different countries. So I mean, you know, I would get if every film he was going to Germany and the Nazis existed, obviously they're going to have to be an integral part of the
yeah.
story. But if he's going to Africa, why couldn't he just be, why couldn't there be a villain that's literally
A good
anyone
point,
else
buddy.
just set during a time where they happen to exist?
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head there, Callum. And it's weird, like you said, the introduction of characters is so bizarre, and like I think this movie just works as a sequel rather than a prequel. I mean, it works as a prequel, but even still, like it doesn't need to be one. Like you said, it really doesn't. And I can't think of a popular movie franchise like this, really, where it's like, okay, movie one and then second movie of the trilogy is a prequel. Like it's unheard of to me. So it was a strange one, but having said that, I had a really great time with this. Surprisingly, this is probably joint favorite for me out of the four.
Yeah, by the end, I had warm feelings for it, but it sort of soured me in some manner to the character of Indiana Jones.
Yeah,
Just where I sort of have to forcefully retract the statement in which I called him immensely competent, because he also drinks a poison drink that was handed to him by a dangerous criminal. He's there for like a shitty like it seems like a weird drug deal where he's like he's trading like ashes for a diamond, and then the
yeah,
guy goes, no, I want the diamond as well. And then he's literally like holding this woman. Like, how does he have a romantic relationship with Willie when he was literally holding a knife to her belly? I mean, like maybe it's a weird like Stockholm syndrome situation where they were
yeah,
forced together into that plane, and then they were brought together by I guess her interpretation of a traumatic experience, but it's probably just a normal Tuesday for him.
yeah,
It seems like he's recovering artifacts all the time, and this is not in any way out of his wheelhouse. But I mean,
yeah.
he's meant to be incredibly smart, and then he just like shots this drink that's been given to him by
A
like
shady guy.
a gangster.
Yeah.
It just makes no sense
In a
to me.
similar line with that, Indy must have consumed the slowest acting poison ever. It takes a good like 10 minutes, excuse me, to act. And also, like if you've poisoned someone, like I know when I poison someone, you don't tell them you've poisoned them or that you've got an antidote to cure the poison. You just let them die.
Yeah, I guess it's because he wanted leverage because he wanted the diamond back. But yeah, just poison him, let him die, and
And
then take the diamond off his corpse.
yeah,
Yeah, it's quite easy. And in that similar vein, as like a sort of revenge, the character of let me just see. I think it's Lao She. Uh, he like puts this character. He puts Indy and Willie and Short Round all on this plane, and then has the pilots jump out so that the plane crashes. just shoot them in the head. Like this will come up a lot during this franchise, where they come up with these like elaborate murder
Yeah,
plots, that are like poetic or ironic or brutal, when you could just shoot them in the head.
I
Like
know.
like they're on your plane, blow up the plane if you have to. Then you've had the satisfaction of having him on your plane, because regardless, you're killing all of the poultry that you have on that plane. You're crashing that plane. It's going to be out of commission. You may as well like finish the job and blow it up.
Yeah, exactly. And it sort of seems like a lazy excuse to get a cool action set piece out of it. And that being said, the action set pieces are extremely awesome, but it just feels lazy, like just to have a really elaborate that death doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and sort of like the pilots are just jumping out, and like Willie's like, "Oh no," and Short Round's like, "Oh no, we must wake Doctor Jones." Like none of them, like they all seem nonplussed about the fact that they're all like meant to die, and like I mean, he has not been drugged. Like he's just meant to be asleep. But Indiana Jones like is in a coma. Like he can't be roused from
Yeah.
sleep. But he's just taking a nap. Like it's not like he hasn't been poisoned or drugged or anything.
Yeah, you mentioned the character of Short Round there, and he's probably one of my favorites in the entire franchise. And it's pity we only see him really for one film. And it's great to see Indy in a new environment, in my opinion. We see him in I think it's Asia this time. Yeah, it's Asia, isn't it? And like it's such a cool idea. But then where's Short Round going? This is a prequel that just introduces him, and then he's never really seen again. So I miss him because he's one of my favorites here. I think the actor is really
Yeah,
good.
like that is a huge problem with this film, because it's it's bizarre that a prequel would be set. I mean, that like this whole situation is weird, because they've made a prequel to a film, when there's only been one in the franchise previously.
Yeah.
So there's no one like craving a prequel for it. Also, they said it only 1 year before, so that means that everything that happens in this film, it doesn't make sense when there aren't repercussions or consequences 1 year on when we see him in Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yeah.
So like Short Round, who is like a son to him in this film, is just never seen again, as you said. But literally like 1 year on in Raiders of the Lost Ark, he's not even in that film. Let alone like I get in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Uh it's set 21 years after Raiders of the Lost Ark, and 22 after Temple of Doom. So it kind of makes sense that they would either lose contact, or they're in a comfortable enough like weird like father adoptive son relationship, they don't need to see each other every day. But if he's, your most reliable sidekick, he's part of the reason that you survived this film. 1 year on in Raiders of the Lost Ark, he's still going to be in your life.
Oh
So,
yeah.
retroactively introducing this character and Willie, and having her as a romantic interest, and having him as a sort of like a son figure sidekick. Yeah, it makes no sense that even just 1 year later in Raiders of the Lost Ark, they're gone.
Yeah, and you mentioned the character of Lily there, Callum. I think she's such a downgrade from Marion. She's such a stereotypical like damsel in distress, and it's quite an annoying portrayal of women. I think, especially because Marion's very capable, but in this, they just return to the classic, woman is feeble and she's a damsel in distress. I didn't think was very fair.
Yeah. I mean, it's not an issue if someone is not capable in that extreme environment, because, I would have absolutely zero skills
Yeah,
in,
me
tomb
too.
excavation, or, let's just call it grave robbing. I'd have literally no expertise. So I understand Willie having no expertise. But, when she's just in the jungle, like, spraying perfume on an elephant, or, she's just like screaming at literally everything that, poses no danger to her, that's where I have an issue.
Yeah,
I
I agree with you.
understand not being, entirely capable in sort of like a weird like puzzle solving, cave mystery situation, because
Yeah, no, I agree
I,
with you.
I'd have absolutely, no idea what was going on. But in literally every other situation, she is also incapable of anything. It would be nice if like in at some point in the third act, something that she said like or did that like was out of the box or weird, like came back and it was
Yeah,
important,
yeah,
like if like spraying perfume on something broke the trance that they're in,
yeah.
or something,
It's a good
like
idea.
just something that made her like out of the box thinking relevant, because they don't
Great point,
give
man.
her like a moment to shine. They kind of
Great
just
point, buddy.
make her Indiana Jones's girlfriend more so than Marion. Marion seems capable. She tries to trick people. She has manipulation skills. She's cunning. But then this character is just spraying perfume on elephants and being like, "Oh, Indiana Jones, you're so hot." You
Yeah.
know, like there isn't much depth.
I've taken down a few lines from that scene if you want to cover it now.
Yeah, yeah. Let's cover it now.
Maybe you could be my palace slave. What sort of research would you do on me? Primitive sexual practices, years of field work. That's a
Uh,
good line. That is smooth.
is it smooth? I
It's
mean, it's also
creepy.
it seems incredibly creepy. Yeah, because I mean, she says, yeah, like what research would you do on me? And I mean, he could have said something that wasn't overtly sexual. That was maybe just a little sly, a bit of a wink, but he was kind of like, I want to have sex with you,
Yeah, but
like it was
not
it was
just
it was a
sex.
bit on the nose.
Primitive. Primitive.
I'm not even gonna say the kind of thing I was gonna say, but yeah. I mean, I don't think it's. I suppose it's smooth to be direct and say what you want, but he's
Yeah.
also saying it in like a weird trying to be sexy way that comes
Yeah.
across as a bit full on, a bit creepy.
Does,
But
man.
she seems
Does.
to be into it.
She does.
Like
Yeah.
she says like, oh, he'll be back in 5 minutes, and then she's greatly disappointed when he's not. But
Yeah.
also, I suppose that sort of shows. I mean, that's sort of where I see the most depth in Willie's character, because they're both equally stubborn. She's kind of a
Great point.
match for him emotionally, but not sort of tactically. But at least emotionally, they're both incredibly stubborn. She's like, oh, he'll come to me. He's like, I'm not going to her. She'll have to come to me. But also, if she had like come over to his room, they would have been having sex in front of Short Round. Like Short Round's asleep on the couch.
I didn't even think about that. Yeah. Yeah.
Because then like I didn't notice it until like Indy's like being choked out by the guy that comes out of the wall, and then Short Run like stands up and he's like Mr. Jones, oh no. And then I'm like, oh shit, like they were gonna try and like have sex in front of Short Round. And then
For
he's
sure.
just going like, this is our greatest adventure yet, shorty.
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah, because also, yeah, doesn't she say, yeah, she says whenever he doesn't come over, she's like, oh fuck you, Indiana Jones, like I would have been the time of your life, it would have been the greatest
Yeah.
adventure of all time. And
Yeah.
then I'm like, oh,
I
like
know. I know. This film
you're
does have a
probably
much
both
lighter
like
tone, doesn't it?
overestimating how great you are.
Yeah.
Sorry.
This film does have a much lighter tone than the other films, doesn't it?
Oh really? A strange perception. I think it's I think it's a lot more comedic. But critics actually dislike this film. The most amongst the original three films, just because of its dark tone, and sort of like the ritualistic sacrifices and stuff.
Yeah.
I guess people find that to be dark. But yeah, it is certainly more comedic, and often to its detriment. Where it's trying to be funny and it's a bit cringe.
Yeah. They do have some dark themes in there that I respect. They show a lot of child slavery here, which is quite an unusually dark theme to explore, especially in a PG film, I think. It is. And yeah, as we've said, the set design in this film is some of the best I've ever seen, especially in like the ritualistic cult. It's just so good, man.
Yes, definitely. And you know, this film, obviously they head to the cult, and they witness these things because they're in search for these several stones of a certain kingdom. I didn't really grasp the meaning or the significance of these stones, but I guess it's just that they use them as a means of praying to their god Kali.
Yeah,
So once again, we're sort of introduced to this MacGuffin of the film, like an end goal, like a an artifact or a piece of history, that they have to go after and that everybody's after.
yeah.
So in this film, they're after the three stones of something. I don't really
Three
remember,
stones to something.
but
I don't know what it is.
yeah,
Yeah,
but honestly, because Indiana Jones is an archaeologist and this is his job, this is the only time in a franchise where I think like a MacGuffin really works. Because when you sort of see an Avengers film or any MCU film where they're like going after an Infinity Stone, the whole film revolves around like, we got to get the orb and then get
yeah,
that to nowhere, and like the entire point A to point B of the film is just them getting a stone somewhere, an Infinity Stone somewhere, or getting an Infinity Stone from somewhere. And then there are two of the biggest films of all time based on one guy collecting all six of these stones and then putting them in another MacGuffin, which is the Infinity Gauntlet.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm sort of like constantly rolling my eyes in films where I'm like, ugh, okay, yeah, they got to do this, 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 and they're superheroes, and I'm like, how is any of this relevant? But like, this is his job. His job is to find artifacts. So I think this is one of the only franchises where that concept works.
I think you've hit the nail on the head there, Calvin. It feels like, in a similar, yeah, like, it feels like, yeah, these films do have MacGuffins, but there is plot and a good plot built around that. Whereas in, with the MCU movies with the Infinity Stones and stuff, it just feels like that is the only goal and plot point of the film. Whereas this film, there's a lot of layers there. We see with the stones, but also, they cause a famine and stuff in the land in India. And
Yeah,
there's a lot of plot points around that, and it's sort of like a mystery in a sense, like they all are connected. We see with the ritualistic
yeah.
cult and the three sons and stuff like that. And I love that. And we see like cheap MacGuffins in the Transformers films, the Allspark,
I was
the
literally going to
Matrix.
say the Allspark.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
Allspark, like the Matrix of leadership, all those nonsense things, and they work for those films, don't get me wrong, but I think in this film they nailed it completely, and I'm a huge fan of this one. And it's weird because, like, one thing I wanted to point out in this film, like, there is some like emotional scenes in there as well, and I always appreciate like a stereotypical like campfire scene in a movie, because it always gives you time for the characters to develop. We see that with Wonder Woman, but it's not really a campfire. They're just it's Steve Trevor and Diana on like a boat, and they get to share each other's thoughts and stuff about society. It's one of my favorite scenes in the film, actually. We see that with Up as well, in sort of like the campfire scene there. So I think it's fantastically done here as well. So kudos to the film for that. I love those type of scenes.
yeah, that's really interesting. And I would say the reason that I'm going to give this film a high mark when we move on to ratings in just a bit is its influence on one of the greatest films of all time, Scooby Doo.
Oh yeah.
Because you know, I had no idea that, I mean, like, this isn't a piece of information I read, it's just what I grasped from watching it. And, I haven't researched this to actually, like, see that it's objectively true. But I mean, I think very obviously with sort of the ritualistic headpieces, the human sacrifices, they're in the cave. I think they do a pretty much identical chant of like,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
it's a very similar chant that, this cult does. Same to the cult in Scooby Doo. So I mean, like, did you pick up on that or anything? Like,
I
do you see
didn't
the
when I was watching
parallels?
it, but now that you mentioned it, it's strikingly similar.
Like, it must be a
Must be. Has
reference
to be.
in
Has
Scooby
to
Doo.
be.
It must be, because I think it's sort of packed with like satire and cultural references. So I mean, I just think it must be a huge it must be a
That's interesting, man. I love that.
referential
Yeah.
situation. Um, so the worshippers of Kali, sort of exude their power over the people of this cult, and over. I mean, it's kind of unclear by the end of the film who's actually a follower of Kali, or who has been indoctrinated by the high priest, with this like sort of with this like trance juice that they give to Indiana Jones,
Yeah.
and they give to the
Little girl.
Maharaja.
Yeah.
So, it's actually a boy, the Maharaja.
Oh really?
But
Oh,
wait,
my
yeah,
mistake.
but like, no, it's so weird. I went on the Wikipedia, and it seems that pretty much like every like almost every Asian character in the film was redubbed by another person. Like Lao She in the beginning was redubbed by someone else. The
Okay.
Maharaja is a male, but they were dubbed by a girl. So that is why they have, because Hollywood sort of makes this association with, instead of getting just a child male to do the dubbing, they get a girl. Sort of like in in a lot of like animated kids cartoons, like they have a woman doing the voice of like a male child, like
Yeah.
how Nancy Cartwright does Bart Simpson, and Tara Strong does like Timmy Turner and Ben 10.
Hmm.
There's this association with like women doing the
Yeah.
voices of
Yeah. That's interesting, buddy.
like child males. So I guess that's instance here, but it did just seem that like that just confused me, because I just thought that the character for a hot sec was a girl,
Yeah.
because
Me
I
too.
don't think it replicated the sound of a child male.
And also, I thought they were sort of setting up like a potential romance between, like, well, who I thought was a her on Short Round, because they have sort of like a lot of scenes together. So but yeah, that was my mistake.
Yeah, I guess it's yeah. It was a bit of bromance because I feel like there was like a sort of a high five moment, like nearly where Short Round's like telling a story or doing something at the table, and he kind of just like does like a head
Yeah,
nod or something, or like a goes in for the high five, and is just a bit confused.
yeah,
Um, yeah, so I don't really know why they don't just give the sacrifices like this sort of trance juice, so that they're not like kicking and screaming.
yeah.
Then
Having the chance to
they'd be
escape.
glad to be the sacrifice because
Yeah,
they're going to their god.
it's a great point,
But
buddy.
yeah, it is very unclear as to who's been indoctrinated by the transduce and who's actually there by choice. I would have liked some clarity on that because then Indiana Jones feels kind of very comfortable just killing anyone because he just assumes that they're part of the cult, but they
Yeah.
very possibly were in the same situation as you and the Maharaja.
It's a great point, buddy. It's a great point. And you know what it is about this film, man? Like, one of my favorite scenes occurs just after that when, the mine cart chase. I think that's one of the best scenes in the franchise, maybe the best scene in the franchise for me. And it's weird because I watched this film in like two chunks, and maybe it's why I feel like this, but this film felt so short to me. And maybe it's because I watched it two different, like, sort of 45-minute, sort of 50-minute chunks. So I don't know. Did it feel short to you?
Uh, no, not to me. It felt as long as any of the others.
That's interesting, man. That's probably just my perception of it when I watched it, like two different ways, probably. But no, I'm a huge fan of the actions in this film. It sort of builds gradually and gradually. Like each set piece improves upon the last, and it culminates in like the final bridge sort of face off there. So no, this film, the action's stellar.
Yeah, the action is I mean, largely, I think that Raiders of the Lost Ark sort of set the tone for a lot of action scenes because
Absolutely,
they added comedy in, like physical comedy, which I'm not usually a fan of. But they did it very well,
absolutely.
especially with the scene that he shoots the knife expert. Uh, so yeah, this sort of did step it up to the next level. I thought that the track scene, where they're in the cart,
Mhm.
went on for maybe a bit too long.
Okay, yeah,
But
fair enough.
aside from that, I really did enjoy every action scene. We've sort of discussed the character of Short Round a little bit, uh, and I really expected to not like the character because often child actors are a detriment to the film, and I actually think that he's great aside from some really clunky dialogue. Pretty much any time he says Mr. Jones and then has a line after that, it's usually bad.
Yeah.
But aside from that, I really like the charisma of the child actor.
Absolutely, and it's sort of a pity that he's never brought back for later films because I think it's a fantastic addition, and the chemistry between him and Harrison Ford is actually pretty great. Like you can feel their relationship there, and it's clear that he's got quite a deep backstory as well. So I love the character. I hope they bring him back for like Indiana Jones 5, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I never really understood the motivation to always have this character of Indiana Jones have a romantic interest because he has one in every film, or at least there's some flirtation. And it was sort of Steven Spielberg's idea, I think, of like outdoing Bond because he said that was like the James Bond films were huge at the time, and he sort of wanted a franchise that could compete with it. So he tried to outdo it in many ways, and
Yeah,
we sort of see a situation here that's sort of presented as like the Bond women of those
a
films,
great point.
where there's a couple of women that he has romantic feelings for, but it never seems really relevant to the plot. I think that this film, if you just take out Willie and replace every scene where she's actually integral with Short Round,
It becomes so much better.
aside from yeah, it becomes much better. If you just take out the romantic plot entirely, make them like make him like the sacrifice of the cult, then Indiana Jones stops that, and then they go on the cart. That's the end of the film. I feel like the sidekick character is more important to the Indiana Jones franchise than a romantic interest is.
That's such a great point, Callum. I agree completely, buddy. And I'm trying to think of like classic movie characters who have sidekicks. Really, I suppose Back to the Future, not really, because Doc and Marty are sort of like co-leads, so they don't really have side. Can you think of it? I suppose Batman and Robin's a prime example, but I can't really think of anything else.
Yeah,
Really.
no, not really. I mean, preferably, I don't think that Indiana Jones needs a sidekick, but I think that it's more appropriate to this style of film that a romantic interest is. I mean, I, I
Absolutely.
think I think Marion is an exception to that because she's also, a very capable character. So
Yeah,
she's able to navigate, the tombs and the excavation sites, as well as Indiana Jones is. So, there's a certain degree of leniency I'll give to the character
yeah,
of Marion,
yeah,
which is probably why I'm going to be nicest on the characters in that film and Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, because Marion and Mutt Williams are both very capable, whereas I would say Willie and Elsa in the third film are not.
it's a great point, buddy. It's a great point. I don't have actually anything left to say. Strangely, buddy, do you have anything?
Um, hmm. Sort of just to talk about the character of Indiana Jones.
Go for it.
We sort of talked about the fact that when you make something a prequel, you sort of deprive them of the development, of that film because you're bringing them back to their roots, and that sort of makes sense if you're bringing them back 20 years, like they did with Solo, a Star Wars story, because then that provides maybe meaningful context to decisions made in other films. But I mean, this film gives you like no context really. It's just an adventure set a year before, so why did they even do a prequel? But also, I don't know. For some weird reason, I think that the character of Indiana Jones is like this is like his peak bravery, at least at this point in the franchise. You know, so it kind of implies like a digression that he sort of went from
Also,
being
such
this
an
brave
interesting
to
point.
slightly less brave in Raiders of the Lost Ark, and then back to this peak bravery in the third film. So it's sort of like a weird, like a weird graph where he like peaks here, then dips, then peaks again, and it just doesn't
Yeah.
make sense because clearly they wrote this with the intention of like, oh, he's developed as a character, but then when you think of it as a prequel, that means that he's like devolved.
Yeah, it's certainly an inconsistency, Callum. And for me, I think he's his peak bravery in Last Crusade, where he sort of has to help his father Henry sort of throughout the action scenes and sort of carry him in that instance. But I do agree with you somewhat, buddy. It's an interesting one, and it does sort of show a digression and stuff from that. So it's definitely an inconsistency for sure, buddy.
Yes. So how would you rate the film, Matthew?
So I don't know. This might surprise you, but I think this is probably one of the best adventure films, like not action films, adventure films of all time, and it's actually up there with Dora and Lost City of Gold for me.
I was going to say, what others have you seen? Because I vaguely remember having seen, National Treasure and National Treasure Book of
Yeah,
Secrets. I
like
think the sequel's called.
yeah,
Or is
I've
it called?
seen.
Is it called that, or is that, or am I
No, it's
bullshitting?
national. Yeah, I've seen like Journey to the Center of the Earth. Those films, The Mummy, are quite sim. The Mummy films are especially similar to this. Uh, too similar. I'm trying to think what other
Yeah,
films.
probably.
Mysterious Island with The Rock. Seen them, but these are these aren't like classic adventure films. But you know what I mean. We've reviewed it. We've reviewed Dora, Lost City of Gold and stuff. It's an adventure film, right?
Yeah, you're like, we're experts. We've reviewed Door of the Lost City of Gold, and like whenever I told my brother that I was sort of not looking forward to watching Kingdom of the Crystal Skull because I've obviously heard all of the bad perceptions of the film, he just said, just watch Dora again and pretend it's the
I
fourth one.
love that.
Just talk about it seriously. Replace
I love it,
replace the
bro.
names, like instead of Dora, it's just Indiana Jones. It's like Indiana Jones, like is having this weird like kind of flirtation with this high schooler. Oh no, like probably not the best plan.
Yeah, but no, for me, this is probably one of the best adventure film I've seen certainly, and I haven't watched that many to compare it with, but I think this is probably the best of the franchise, along with the next film that we're going to be talking about. So I'd have to give it a 10. This is like peak for me, Indiana Jones. What about yourself, buddy? I think you made some fantastic points in there.
I would say that this is maybe uh, it's a very great film. As I agree with you, it's a great adventure film. Everything I loved about Raiders of the Lost Ark is still here, aside from some aspects of the character. So I'm not going to rate it as highly as that film, and I would say it's probably well, I mean, it's going to be like co bottom,
Okay,
with another film that we'll talk about later. So I'm still going to give it an 8 out of 10. It's
that's
just that
great,
I
buddy.
think every film in this franchise I think is great. So
Yeah, this is one of
even
the
to be the
best.
least great, it's still great.
This is probably one of the best if we let's say we regard the critical consensus of Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, if we take just the trilogy, the original trilogy, I think this original trilogy, and I don't know if this is a hot take, because I think this movie at the time, I was looking at Wikipedia, it was quite critically panned, but over time it grew more positive in a similar sort of sense to
Yeah.
Back to the Future 2, very similar sense. So
Hmm.
for me, I would say this trilogy stacks up to any classic trilogy that we reviewed. I think it's maybe not. I think Back to the Future's peak for me that we've reviewed, but compared to
Yeah.
Star Wars and like Terminator, I think this is right up there, buddy. What about you?
Yeah, I think in regards to like wide audience perception, if you remove Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, because for many that was like a legacy ruiner, it
Yeah,
it tainted the quality of the franchise. But yeah, if you take the three initial films, audience perception wise, yeah, I think it was probably on the same level as certainly Back to the Future, Jurassic Park, Star Wars original trilogy.
yeah, absolutely, buddy. I'm that's why I'm loving and enjoying. That's why I'm really enjoying covering these big franchises. Like I wouldn't have watched these really otherwise, probably. So it's sort of crazy to think like on this 1 year journey together, we've covered like Star Wars, Terminator, Back to the Future, Jurassic Park, Indiana Jones, and what three of those have been in lock? No, yeah, three of those have been in lockdown, buddy. So I think what are the big franchises left to cover? Like I can't really think. Maybe Godfather, but it's not really an action sort of franchise. Star
Yeah,
Trek, maybe. I don't know. Planet of the Apes,
uh, yeah, I was thinking, yeah, Planet of the Apes, Rocky, Creed,
Rocky.
those vibes.
But we've covered a lot,
And I'm
haven't we?
I'm really looking forward to talking about those. Yeah, we have covered a lot, and honestly, I think, yeah, I agree with you. I probably never would have got around to watching these films if I didn't like it sounds bad, but like force myself to,
Yeah,
because I said to you the other day that I was struggling to get the motivation to watch these because I just assumed that I would not like them,
I get
and
you,
I
man.
was
I get you
very
completely.
pleasantly surprised.
I get
Because I
you
mean,
completely.
aside from Dora and the Lost City of Gold, I'm not like a big like rollicking like adventure into the jungle kind of person. It kind of just usually isn't for me. But I
Yeah.
think these films are very accessible.
Absolutely, buddy. And like you've inspired me to start like a DVD collection of my own, really. And like I was in CEX the other day, and I picked up I picked up I don't know if you can see it. Like I picked up that copy of Indiana Jones and
Yeah.
stuff, and like have you've got the same, haven't you?
You may be sorely disappointed, Matthew, because I don't know if I told you this the other day, but obviously that's just the original trilogy, isn't it? It doesn't have
Yeah, it's
doesn't
weird. It's
have
it's it's very
Kingdom
sneaky
of the
because it
Crystal
has
Skull.
four DVD covers in this, and but one of them's classified as bonus material. It's not Kingdom of the Crystal
Yeah.
Skull, so they're quite
But
sneaky and
Matthew,
snaky with that.
yeah, I'll tell you how mine was sneakier. Well,
Okay.
one, Raiders of the Lost Ark, the DVD was fucked. So,
Oh
like, I
Jesus,
actually went about this
the best way,
legitimately.
buddy.
I bought the DVD and then it was fucked, so I couldn't watch it. So I had
This
to
is
use the
CEX
internet. So
again.
that. Yeah, that was my fault. And then I went to watch Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, and it was just another copy of The Last Crusade. They'd given me two copies of The Last Crusade, so
Bastards.
so again, I went about it the legitimate way. I paid for it, and I wasn't able to watch it.
That we've talked about before, like about buying DVDs and then they come out on Netflix.
It's
Like that happened with you with like
yeah.
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, didn't it?
Oh yeah, that was embarrassing. Like, because I mean, it's not like the original trilogy, which is quite highly regarded aside from the third film. It was literally like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Out of the Shadows, which everyone thinks is garbage, but I quite enjoy. And then like a few weeks later, yeah, it's on Netflix, but I literally spent like £10 buying Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Out of the Shadows.
I was quite fortunate that like they had this, to be honest, like, and they actually didn't have like a sneaky like Last Crusade or a dodgy disc in there. But I'm a huge fan of these films so far, buddy, and I'm loving covering them with you. So did you want to move on to our third film then?
Yes, sure. So, of course, the third film for today is The Last Crusade. Uh, and this is sort of where we see a lot of differences. I think I think the first two films are I think the first two films are very similar, but this film is actually like Steven Spielberg, crafted this film with the intention of being like Raiders of the Lost Ark because he didn't want the same critical perception of this film as with the Temple of Doom. So this film is actually him trying to be similar to the first film, but I actually think it's the most distinct up until this point.
I agree completely, buddy. And it's weird, man, because this film. I know we've mentioned Back to the Future, and I don't want to keep bringing it back up, but this film is reminds me of Back to the Future 3 in a sense that, opens with a sort of like a Western style scene, and it's certainly the most different. Like the way Back to the Future 3 is rather. We covered that and we thought it was the most different out of the trilogy. I think this is the most different out of the four films so far. Oh, sorry, out of the three films that we've covered so far. One thing I'd never thought I'd say, I'm glad Nazis are back, and I'll never say that again. I'll never say that again in my life. But it's just one of those things. I think they made really great villains, and I'm sort of glad that they brought them back to sort of mimic the reception they got on Raiders of the Lost Ark. That being said, this film just feels completely different for that. But I'm not. That's not a criticism on my part. I had a great time with this. It feels refreshing, almost.
Yes, and as you mentioned, the sort of Western epilogue, or is it no the Western prologue of the film? It opens with a young Indiana Jones played by River Phoenix, which is Joaquin Phoenix's older brother.
Mm-hmm.
Playing a young Indiana Jones, and he was specifically recommended by Harrison Ford because he had played his son in another film and said,
Cool.
this is the kid who right now in Hollywood resembles me most at my
Love that.
young age.
Love that.
And clearly very early on, we see that this character has always been obsessed with putting things in museums. But it's not your history to gawk at. It's someone else's culture, and he's like, oh, you can't possibly steal this artifact and then like sell it on the black market or like fence it for money. But I mean, your intention is to still steal it from their culture and then put it in a museum, like
It's a
a
great point.
Western museum, for a Western audience to go, oh yeah, that's nice, that's a nice artifact. And this is sort of like abundantly pointed out in Black Panther, because Killmonger,
Yeah.
enters a museum, and then he says, I like this artifact, I want it, and they say it's not for sale, and he's like, oh, do you think that the people that they stole it from were paid a fair price? And
It's a great point.
I think that theme is very apparent here. That we've sort of talked about the immorality of zoos. Obviously for capturing animals for humanity to gawk at, and I think that's sort of a similar thing here, where you're stealing from
It's a great point, Callum.
other cultures for visual pleasure.
Yeah, and I think that's where the morally condemnable part of Indy's character definitely resurfaces, and we mentioned about like the opening characters in the film that Indy sort of steals the artifact from, that they are what Indy becomes, even like in the metaphor of like, the leader like putting his fedora on Indy, like that is who Indy is becoming now, and that is definitely I think we can condemn him for that, right?
Yeah, but I don't think he's even self-aware enough to
Yeah,
realize that.
yeah, I
He
know.
think he
Yeah.
I think he considers himself like morally righteous, but I honestly see no difference between stealing an artifact and selling it than stealing an artifact and putting it in a museum. Regardless, you've stolen from a culture. It's just that one of you has made a monetary profit from it.
It's a great point.
It doesn't excuse it morally just because you've put it in a museum. So yeah, I agree with you. He has become that, but I don't think that he's self-aware enough to realize.
Yeah, me too, man. And we've mentioned before we mentioned before in the podcast about James Bond and the potential influences there for the character, and we see in this film Sean Connery, formerly Bond himself, and he's just fantastic here. This is the first film I think I've seen him in, which is yeah. So, and he's just got a real charm about him, and you can tell like he's a very experienced actor. And it's not often that I would say that about an actor, but he's completely at home in this role here. He's just fantastic.
Yeah, I again also hadn't seen him in another film, so I wasn't really aware of his accent. I was like, I've heard people do like the exaggerated, incredibly Scottish accent. So when he was sort of here with a bit more of a muted Scottish accent, I was sort of like, I don't really know what accent he's going for. I was like, is this his very bad attempt at an American accent?
Yeah, that's what
Is
I
this
was
him
thought. That's
like
what I thought.
tone? I was like, is this him toning down his like Scottish to be English? But then it does seem that the character is intended to be Scottish. I guess maybe just my perception of what his accent would be was sort of a bit more exaggerated, and that's maybe just how he does speak regularly.
Yeah, Harrison Ford goes for the Scottish accent here, and is it intentionally bad?
Wait, you think it's bad? I mean, it's kind of like caricaturish, but I think it has a charm. Like
Okay.
people sort of talk about like
Fair.
good and bad accents. But I
Yeah.
mean, you're always going to find someone in real life who has that accent. Like say I did a very bad American accent and it was like over exaggerated, over pronounced, over enunciated. There's going to be at least one American who does speak like that. So it's technically not
I
incorrect.
suppose so.
It's
Yeah,
just
everyone speaks
it's just
differently,
very
don't they?
niche. So I mean, he is doing a very exaggerated, like howdy do do do, like like kind of like how people do like an exaggerated Irish accent. It's kind of a very exaggerated like Highlands, Scottish accent. So it is very exaggerated, very caricaturish. But I'm sure some people speak like that. It's obviously
That's a
not.
great
It's
point.
obviously not the masses of Scotland. Because it's obviously it is incredibly exaggerated, but it's not impossible that someone does genuinely speak like that.
It's a great point. It's a great point. And here's a question for you, buddy. What is the best, not just a fake American accent from someone who's not American, but what's the best accent in or film and TV history, in your opinion, or that you've seen?
Well, obviously, I can't speak to the quality, but the appearing quality of every accent that Jodie Comer does in Killing Eve
Okay,
is incredibly
haven't
impressive. I
seen
would
it
say
yet.
that she's probably the best accent, the best accent actress working today. That's just a marvel of acting. That show, like she is incredible.
Mm-hmm.
Worst accent, I don't know because I would say Marlon Brando in A Streetcar
That's
Named
what I was gonna
Desire,
say.
but also I don't think he's doing an accent
He has just his
because
voice.
because I mean, the character of Stanley is obviously from New Orleans, and I think he is from in reality like Kansas or something. So he is American. Like it's not like he's doing a fake American accent. I think he is doing a fake like Louisiana accent. But I mean,
Yeah,
how difficult can that be? But he's just entirely like incomprehensible. Like you cannot understand a single word that he's saying. So I would say, I'm pretty sure that's him putting on an accent. Regardless, I can't understand what he's saying, but he's still
yeah.
speaking in an American accent. So I will say Marlon Brando.
That's a great point, man.
What are your thoughts?
I don't know if this is a hot take, but maybe the first one isn't. But I think TV wise, Charlie Cox as Matt Murdock is probably one of the best I've ever seen. I think his American accent is very good, and I think he is probably helped by that because his voice is so deep, really. So he doesn't really have to stretch it. Like I think if you have a high pitched voice, you have to stretch for the accent sometimes. But film wise, and I know this is going to seem like a very narrow-minded view that I only watch superhero movies and TV shows, but I think Henry Cavill's American accent as Superman is pretty great.
It is indeed,
So
definitely.
those are probably
What what
mine.
what would you pin worst on though?
Worst accent. Oh, that's a good one. I would say I'm trying to look at movies here that I've seen that have bad accents in them. I don't know, man.
Kate Blanchett
Oh
in
yeah.
Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
Oh yeah. That I'd mentioned that in Came of the I don't know, man. To be honest with you, I would say probably Marlon Brando or like yeah, like Kate Blanchett or something like that. They're dodgy ones.
I've heard that Nicolas Cage's accent in Captain Corelli's Mandolin is particularly bad, but I've yet to experience it.
Yeah. We'll definitely have to cover Nick Cage films because you're a huge fan of Raising Arizona, right?
Oh yeah, I mean Nick Cage is he's a national treasure. I love the man.
But yeah, like
Yes, so we sort of talked about the two very differing personalities of Indiana Jones, and you sort of said that you wanted to mention, and I've written here that I would say this is probably the biggest example of them being like incredibly jarring and opposing. And I just don't find it that convincing in this film, especially.
yeah, what is it for you, man? Is it like the dynamic he has with his father in this that it wasn't for you, or what was it?
Well, it's not that it's for me. I just found it unconvincing that someone could be so different in their two lines of work. They just have just two distinct personalities because we sort of talked about the idea of him being like a bumbling nerd when he's at work, and I think that's most on display here. I think when he's with his work colleague at work, he's just such a different guy, and the way he sort of like sometimes in these films, like as we said, Steven Spielberg wanted to make this feel like Raiders of the Lost Ark, so
Yeah.
he has characters brought back. He has Sala, and he has do you remember the name of his work
Oh,
colleague? It's
Martin. It's
something
not like
Marcus.
Marlin. Marlin, is it?
it's something Marcus.
Marcus
But
Marcus
I don't remember.
Brody, is it?
Oh yeah. So yeah, he has his coworker Marcus, and they wanted to make it feel similar. So they have the same kind of scene of like him, like packing his shit, to like
Yeah,
go on his mission,
yeah,
and just sort of in those moments of like connection with the character of Marcus and Indiana Jones, it doesn't feel like any of the other connections he has with any other characters when he's on his adventure. He just
yeah,
feels like a different guy. And I
yeah. I
guess maybe
suppose,
that's
yeah.
just taken to the extreme of like you're different around different friends. Like how you maybe expose like one side of your personality than to the other. But I feel like because we're seeing both sides, it's just so weird.
I get you, buddy. I get you. And yeah, I think definitely the dynamic between him and his father is certainly a much more humorous one than we've seen with any other interactions he's had with characters. And I think this film has a very humorous tone as well, in a similar vein to the last one. But yeah, like I do agree with you, buddy. I do agree with you, and it is probably like we've said, another character inconsistency, and it's probably due to the fact that like one of the films here out of three is a prequel.
Yeah. I mean, people are complicated. They can have different personality traits around different people, but I mean, I just feel like it's one person and then it's a different person. And again, this is not a critique of the film. It's just something I observed. It's not something that I'm criticizing
Yeah,
necessarily.
no, I get you.
So it does not change my enjoyment of the film. I'm just kind of like, oh wow, he's a very different dude.
Yeah,
Maybe it's just when he puts on the hat, that sort of like gives him a sort of energy. Like when I wear a leather jacket, I'm just like, I'm
you're a
cool
different
now.
beast.
You know,
Yeah.
yeah, different dude. I feel fucking huge, jacked. It
When's the new jacket
it
coming,
just it
man?
just gives you an air of confidence. What?
Have you? When's the new jacket coming? Have you got it?
The new jacket? Yeah, I
Yeah.
got it, and it looks great.
Are you going tomorrow? Are you going to wear it tomorrow?
I will be wearing it tomorrow. Very, very humbly, it looks awesome.
Man, I don't got it. I've never seen you in a leather jacket, so I'd love. I know that's not a leather jacket, but I'd love to see you in like a cool jacket, man. That'd be cool.
Yeah, if I can pull it off,
Oh
I
man,
will
you
be I
will.
will be
You
getting
will.
one. Trying to change the style and the image for
I love that.
university,
I
so I
love
can
that, bro.
so I can trick some new friends into thinking I'm cool, because it did not work on the last ones.
Oh, like trust me, man. You'd pull it off. You'd pull it off.
I mean, like I never pretended to be cool. Like I don't think pretending to be someone you're not is a cool thing to do.
Yeah,
I
it's not
think I
healthy
think
either, is it?
yeah. I mean, like, are we gonna get into a serious chat? But like, yeah, I think you should only like project truth about yourself, because then one, you're sort of like not being your true self, and that's not good for your mental health, because that's going to be tiring. But also, if you're a terrible person and you've sort of like let people in for a bad ride, like if you're a bad person and you sort of convince a bunch of people that you're a good person, then when you eventually stab them in the back or betray them in some manner,
Yeah,
they're going to be left devastated.
it's a great point, but it's a great point, and no, like I'm looking forward to tomorrow, like to
It's a
see. I
weird
know that
show we
we've
do.
got, yeah, we like to open ourselves up to the viewers, don't we? More and more.
Yes, definitely. Will you be drinking tomorrow, Matthew? I know you're
Yeah,
you're,
cheeky
you're not a
cheeky
drinker.
cider. You know what I'm saying?
A cheese cider. Yeah, I'll probably be getting blocked. Let's be honest. We'll
Can't
we'll
wait.
see though.
Can't wait, man. Looking forward to it. But back to the film.
Yes. So, um, what have I? What the fuck is this word? Um. Yes. Okay. So we're introduced to the character of. Oh, I was about to like jump to another film. I was like introduced to the character of Mutt Williams. We are not. Uh, so we're introduced to the character of Henry Jones Sr.
Mhm.
And they're eventually captured by Nazis, of which this character Elsa, who presents herself as a romantic interest for both of the Joneses, she betrays them. Which I mean, did you find that quite obvious? Because from the start, the character that had employed him said, "Don't trust anyone." I was like, okay, then don't trust him. Don't trust Elsa. Oh, they're both Nazis. Okay, that's
Yeah.
unsurprising.
You know what it is about just her overall look? I thought that was like Amber Heard because they look remarkably similar, I think.
Okay, yeah, they sort of do have a similar vibe when Amber Heard's blonde. Yeah, I get you
Yeah,
definitely.
but no, I thought it was
And
quite obvious.
Yeah, and once they're captured by the Nazis, they also make their great escape, and they leave by going in. I think it's quite a famous scene of them leaving in the motorbike and sidecar, and they sort of hide themselves in a box, and they let out a boat as a decoy. But I mean, maybe wait a solid like 30 more seconds
That's what I said.
before rolling out on the bike, because like
Yeah.
you've let the boat off as a decoy. You've had the Nazis get in a boat to chase you, and then they wait 1 second and roll out in front of the Nazis
Yeah.
when they could have just waited
Defeats the
20
purpose.
seconds until they were at least a few meters out.
Absolutely, absolutely. Like it was a weird one, man. I had the same point. Just wait a few more seconds. And the decoy it'll work. It wasn't much of a decoy, really.
Yeah, I was very disappointed because I mean, Indiana Jones is meant to have like a lot of ingenuity and be sort of like a tactical genius, but there isn't much of that here.
One scene I did really like was when I don't know if this is iconic. Maybe you can shed some light on that, brother. But when Indiana Jones gets face to face with Adolf Hitler. I thought that was quite a good scene in the film because he's sort of like absent throughout the films the Nazis are in, and it's weird because like the leader of the Nazi party is Adolf Hitler, so it's unusual that they wouldn't include him. So it was interesting, man. I thought it was a cool one.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't really know what it was like to live back then, but I imagine, uh, at that point again, this film is still set. This film set in 1938, so it is still pre-war. Obviously Hitler was, maintaining his fascist regime. It's just that this is before the Second World War itself broke out. But
Hmm.
we're sort of introduced to the character during the book burning. But sort of at this point again, it's pre-war, so maybe he wouldn't have had the worldwide coverage, and it would have been like, obviously we didn't live in the time, so we don't know what the perception was at this point in time,
Yeah,
pre-war. But I assume it was just that people recognized it as a fascist regime where they had this dictator and it was very reclusive, sort of in the sense that like North Korea is right now.
yeah, it's a
But
good point.
sort of my comparison is if I went to North Korea and I was just walking in the middle of the street and encountered Kim Jong Un, I would not know what he looks like, and we have the internet now. So would anyone know what Adolf Hitler looks like if he was just
Yeah, that's
a
a really
if
interesting
well
one, man.
like if he was a fascist dictator before the war and before the internet, would you actually know what he looks like?
That's
Because I
such a
mean,
great point.
he
Yeah.
seems to sort of know as soon as he makes eye contact with him that this is Hitler.
That's such a great point. Yeah, I never really considered that, buddy, because yeah, like you said, the internet wasn't there back then, so there wouldn't have been like images of him to reference. So yeah, that's
Yeah,
he probably wouldn't have known who he was. I suppose by like him like giving the speech and stuff at the sort of massive building, maybe it was he sort of put two and two together. But yeah, it's an interesting one, mate.
yeah. I mean, obviously we know what Hitler looked like because there were photos retrieved, I assume, from Germany, and then they were brought, and put in like history books, and there's video clips that are put on television and they're in movies. Just because of our cultural awareness of that situation, and the historical significance of him as a figure, and our historical knowledge of the war. But I would have thought at the time most people probably wouldn't have known what his physical appearance was.
Yeah, like do you remember that thing a few years ago about I think Ricky Gervais did an interview as well about killing baby Hitler and stuff. That was a big thing.
Yeah, I think like what was it? Yeah, I know Richard Gervais talked about it, but I mean, didn't like Don Cheadle or something? Like it was someone
Something like
weird that
that.
I wouldn't expect who did an interview and they're like, nah, I wouldn't. Oh wait, no, no, I think I've made that association because he was talking about like, do you remember in Avengers Endgame where he says, "Can't we time travel and just kill Thanos as a baby?"
Yeah. Oh,
And then he
yeah.
does like
Yeah.
sort of like the
Yeah.
pillow like
Yeah.
suffocating motion.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah, no, you're right, yeah, yeah. But yeah, yeah, I know Ricky Gervais I think said he wouldn't kill baby Hitler,
Yeah.
and
It's an
I mean
interesting
we're
one.
not we should not get into time travel, like
No.
let's not bother. But I mean like time travel, the idea is like create ripples not waves. Like you're going to change the time stream dramatically if you like remove one figure, and like you don't know how things would have turned out if things were different.
Yeah, it's a great point, man. It's a great point. Um, You know, one thing about this film I really think is the chase scenes. You know, the tank one is fantastic, and the use of practical effects there is amazing as well. And you know, I love when they're just in the huge like blimp sort of,
Yeah,
and like Harrison Ford is like he looks really aggressive because we see like a member of staff on the blimp, and like Harrison Ford's just like following him with a really cross face, like beats him up and takes his clothes, and like it's just asking for tickets. I thought that was absolutely priceless, man. One of my favorites.
yeah, and that scene was exactly what I was going to talk about next, because the Holy Grail is like, we've talked about the Ark of the Covenant, it being significant, but pretty much with every movie, like they top it every time with its importance. And in this film we have the Holy Grail, which provides immortality. It is at this point in the franchise the greatest artifact in history, and you sent two Nazis to try and get the journal, like from the
Yeah,
blimp.
I
Two
know.
Nazis, like,
Yeah.
and then they're like so easily dispatched by Indiana Jones.
I know, and like surely Indiana Jones has got a reputation that he requires a bloody army to take down at this point.
Yeah, I mean, he's world renowned as this famous adventurer. People know that he takes these artifacts, and that he has all these big brawls. But yeah, they never send enough guys. They never have enough firepower. Indiana Jones survives by dumb luck, and it's just it is strange, because like
It is.
especially in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, it really pushes believability,
It
because he's
does. It does.
clearly in his 60s, and he's just like laboring. And they show him like miss with his whip in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, but I mean he's still like beating the shit out of dudes.
Yeah, yeah, I know, man. And one thing about this film, like we've mentioned about them trying to recreate the aura and the magic of Raiders of the Lost Ark, and I think it does to a certain extent. And one thing I suppose is apparent about like the Nazi who drinks from the Holy Grail but uses the wrong sort of cup and like ages into dust. I thought that was so well done. It reminded me of the face melting scene, and it's actually a fantastic visual for 1989.
Yeah, I think it is hugely reminiscent. I definitely agree, and I would say that that is probably one of the most iconic scenes in film history. And they did like How I Met Your Mother was huge for like parodying certain films.
Hmm.
They did whole episodes dedicated to like parodies. And there's an episode in season 9 where Ted is going to Barney and Robin's wedding, and he's trying to figure out like who to have, like the idea of like a wedding romance with, where you sort of in American culture, they talk about like, oh yeah, let's go to a wedding, and
Wedding Crashers style.
like pick up a bridesmaid or whatever,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
in this situation he's deciding like who to have, like a weekend fling with. And every time he like makes a decision, like a knight appears and goes, you chose poorly. And like to parody this
Yeah,
film. And it is really great to watch these films, and then that provides like you know an interesting context for a lot of things I watched as a child. Because
absolutely,
I,
man.
I also watched, there's also like a huge misery, like a misery parody in an episode of How I Met Your Mother. And
Oh,
I
cool.
didn't really understand that until I saw Misery. And it's a really valuable context that these films add.
I still get goosebumps from the ankle breaking scene in Misery, just as you mentioned that, man. It sends shivers down my spine, genuinely, man. It is gruesome.
Yeah, I loved it. uh
It was good.
Big fan. So yes, you mentioned that the Nazi takes the wrong cup, but Indiana Jones is wise enough, I guess, to choose the right one. But surely that's just dumb luck. Like they never show like a thought process for him. He's just like, fuck
Yeah.
it, this one,
I looked
and
it
then
up on
and then he gets it.
Wikipedia, and it was like Indiana chooses the wooden cup, but I don't know what relevance that has to. Do you know what I
But
mean? Like,
also maybe maybe it's actually that every single one was the Holy Grail. Maybe like it was just a metaphor, and every single one was the Holy Grail, but it's actually who you are as a person and whether you deserve to receive the
it's
gift.
a great point.
Because
Yeah.
they sort of say like yeah, maybe it is that, because like I mean I'm not like like celebrating my own theory, like
No, I
yeah,
know what you
go
mean, man. I know
Callum,
what you mean.
that does sound right. But there's a line maybe like halfway in or two-thirds in where they say, anyone who drinks from the cup who is not righteous will receive eternal damnation or something. So
Mhm.
maybe it's that if someone who doesn't deserve the gift like tries to take it, even if it's the right cup, they will die. So I mean, maybe every single cup was a viable option, and it's like like
Yeah.
maybe he just chose won at random, and it turned into the Holy Grail
Yeah.
because he deserved it.
Yeah, absolutely, buddy. And that being said, immortality is a theme that the Wolverine movies have covered really well. And I think it just sounds absolutely awful as a concept.
Yeah,
I wouldn't want to be immortal at all. It sounds
no,
horrendous.
and I mean, sort of a weird thing is that he takes a drink from the Holy Grail, of holy water, and he drinks it and obviously doesn't die. So that therefore he has the conclusion that this is the Holy Grail. But does that mean that he's now immortal,
That's what I
or do you
thought.
have to
Yeah.
keep topping up? Like, do you need to drink from it constantly? I guess maybe that's why. Actually, I was gonna say something that's actually the opposite of the truth, because like between like Raiders of the Lost Ark and Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, it's like a 28 or 29 year difference, but it takes place over 21 years.
Yeah.
So Harrison Ford actually looks older than he should, whereas he should look even younger because he took this.
Yeah.
He should have maintained his youth for a little bit.
Hmm.
Uh,
Fair
so
point.
it's actually worked in the opposite direction. Maybe
Yeah,
if they'd
it's
set
aged him
like
up, if
maybe
anything.
maybe yeah maybe if they had set Kingdom of the Crystal Skull like 10 years later than they chose to. I mean, maybe that would have worked even better.
Yeah, how old is he supposed to be in this movie? Like, I'm guessing in his 40s.
Yeah, I guess 40s, and then maybe his like early 60s. Like me, yeah, it's difficult to call because I always thought in Raiders of the Lost Ark he's meant to be in his 30s, and maybe he is in his late 30s, and then here his early 40s, and then his early 60s in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, I guess.
Yeah. And I don't have anything else to say really for Last Crusade, buddy. Anything from you? Sorry,
Just
a
that,
really strange title, isn't it? Last Crusade.
yeah, I guess just because they talk about the Crusades, and
The night, I suppose.
but I don't really understand the historical meaning behind that, so I'll not comment further. But I suppose it's just a reference to that, and this is their final endeavor.
Yeah.
But I think also it's maybe a reference to this being the intended like capping off of a trilogy.
Yeah.
But I don't think it doesn't really end like the ending of a trilogy. Sort of like Back to the Future had a very definitive ending where I feel, well, it wasn't fully definitive. It was kind of like, oh, things could carry on, but you felt satisfied.
Yeah.
And I didn't feel a sense of satisfaction here, but I didn't feel a sense of satisfaction in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull either. So we'll sort
Mhm.
of talk about whether it's a good or a bad thing that they're doing Indiana
Yeah.
Jones 5. We'll talk about that soon. But just the last thing I had to say was we obviously see him, globe trotting, going to every country in the world and killing dozens of people, every time. But the one person he won't let die is a pretty lady. You know, like he will literally like shoot a dude in the face. For like, for being like a vague villain, or like he'll be glad that like another grave robber has died. He'll be like, who cares? Or he'll be actually happy about it. But like literally when a Nazi is like falling to her death, he's like, no, you're hot, I must try and save
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
Don't touch the Holy Grail, let me pull you up. And I'm like, let her die.
He
Like
almost
she
suffers the same
kidnapped she
fate.
kidnapped your dad, she tried to kill both of you.
Yeah.
They tried to like steal countless things. They're Nazis, and like clearly, even in this pre-war world, the whole world was fully aware of its fascist regime. So I mean, you know I don't see why he has a problem with her death just because she was a pretty lady.
I know. And he almost suffers the same fate as her.
Yeah, I think it just makes him come off as a bad dude. That like he's just morally inconsistent. He will kill someone. If it's a dude, but he won't even like let a woman die.
Yeah, I know what you mean, man. I do know what you mean. Um, I don't have any other points, buddy. Anything from you?
No, nothing more for me. So I'd love to hear your rating of the film.
Thanks, buddy. So, for me, I think this is probably joint up there with Temple of Doom. I had a great time with this, and it's probably due to the fantastic dynamic between Indy and his father, and it sort of delves deeper into Indy's background and stuff. So, for me, I think this is one of the best adventure films again. So, I'd give it a 10 out of 10.
Oh wow! Oh
What about
damn.
you, buddy?
Uh, yeah, I think this is probably joint in quality for me with Raiders of the Lost Ark. So I will rate it the same with a 9 out of 10.
Love
You know,
that, mate. Love
I
that.
think while Steven Spielberg obviously wanted to capture a similar tone, I don't think he did that, but I think that he captured the same magic as you said.
Yeah, no worries. So do you want to move on to Kingdom of the Crystal Skull then, buddy?
Yes. So I'm looking forward to chatting to you about this because this is well renowned as being a bad film, and I'm
Yeah,
very baffled by that consensus, honestly.
me too. You know, I remember this film being pretty big when it first came out, and maybe that was added to it by like the Lego games. But no, this film was massive back in the day, as I recall.
Yeah, I mean, I'm genuinely confused because we watch a lot of films here, and a lot of the times, we don't usually agree with the mass public opinion. Obviously, you enjoyed Joker and Avengers Endgame, whereas I had uh lesser opinions on those films. But I can always recognize when someone says about a bad film, I can always go, okay, I get it, but I don't agree with it. Say Fantastic Four from 2005, sorry, from 2015. It was widely regarded as one of the worst films of that year, and certainly the worst Fantastic Four film. Whereas I quite enjoyed how it blended like horror and science fiction,
Yeah,
and a superhero film. But I could definitely see when people said it was boring or rushed. I was like, yeah, I definitely agree. Like I can definitely see that. But here, I didn't actually see a huge issue. There's a couple of nitpicks, but like I don't know how anyone could think that this is like like a franchise ruiner.
it's really not. It's actually not bad. You know, I think it works as a reboot, so to speak, and I think it's probably due to people's high expectations of the original trilogy. Like, you know, this film's very different, but I think it works, especially and I think in a similar sense to Logan, it's really refreshing to see like an aged up protagonist, and I think like Harrison Ford still like molds into that role so well. Like he feels so comfortable even at like whatever age he was, like late 60s maybe at the time, or sorry, early 60s at the time. So, good on him.
Yeah, I mean, as we said, this is 27 years after Raiders of the Lost Ark. So I suppose that people just had high expectations for this sort of like reignition of the franchise in the
Yes.
sense that people had a lot of expectations for Jurassic World, which were thankfully met. That they're great. So I suppose people's expectations just weren't met. But because I had none of those and I watched these in such quick succession, it just felt like part of the gang. It felt
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
it felt like a perfectly consistent film. It obviously takes a very big left turn with the introduction of interdimensional beings as they call them, but I think I'll probably just call them aliens.
Yeah.
In the film, it is a huge departure. In this film, but it also does capture the zeitgeist of the time that they're trying to
Completely,
capture
buddy.
because
Completely.
the other films were set in the 30s and this is set in the 50s, so this is obviously like post Roswell, New Mexico. So like aliens were a big thing back then. So I do think that this captures the tone of the time that it's set in, as
Absolutely.
well as the other films.
I think you've hit the nail on the head there, buddy, completely. And I think it has a really fantastic 1950s aesthetic here. And I love that sort of decade so much, just in general, like music and pop culture and stuff. So it's fantastic. And, I just love how experienced this Indiana Jones is. He refers to a lot of adventures that are off screen, but they don't really need to be shown because, he's lived for 20 more years. I'm sure he's had so many more adventures. So that's great for me. And, I think this film's really underrated, and it did really well at the box office. So maybe that goes to show, like, people, there was a warrant for it, and people did see it. So I mean, uh, I don't know, like it seems like these sort of films, especially in like the sort of mid to late 2000s, like there was a lot of critically panned films at that time, which I thought was a little unfair. Like it's some sort of reminds me of like how Spider-Man 3 has been treated. Yeah, I can acknowledge that film's not a fantastic film in reference to the other two Raimi films, but it's not a bad film. I think if you remove a few elements from both Kingdom of the Crystal Skull and Spider-Man 3, they become fantastic.
Yeah, I think that time maybe acted as sort of like a pivot in filmmaking where it transitioned from, I mean, a big part of it was the transition like from practical effects to CGI use, being
Iron
used
Man, I
very
suppose.
popularly.
Yeah.
But it was at the point where they couldn't do it very well. Obviously, yeah, as you said, Iron Man came out the same year as this, and it's obviously like a marvel of CGI. But this is this does have some pretty big examples of bad CGI. Admittedly, it is CGI heavy, which was one of the biggest criticisms of it. And it didn't plague the original three films as much as it does this film.
Yeah.
So they couldn't do CGI very well, but they have a huge reliance on it. So I suppose that's probably an issue in itself, I guess.
Yeah, that being said, like there's definitely an over reliance in CGI, but I don't think it's terrible. It's not like it's not like I'm trying to think of really bad examples of CGI. It's not like Dark Phoenix, X-Men Dark Phoenix bad. Like the CGI for the final act of that is atrocious. It's not Black Panther bad, I don't think. It's not
Yeah,
great.
I would say the one like egregious scene and like use of CGI is where they're just they're just driving a truck through a clearing, but the clearing has been created by like a steamroller or like a
Yeah,
combine harvester that's like chipping up wood like as it's moving along, and that
yeah,
looks genuinely horrific.
it does. Yeah,
But I would say that's the only time that I had a huge issue with it. I think people often point to the scene where like Shia LaBeouf is like swinging with the monkeys, and obviously it's not, that's not possible unless you're fucking Tarzan. But
yeah, or
I don't
Dora.
think it looks terrible. I don't think it looks objectively terrible.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good point, man. That's a good point. Like this film is quite harshly received. I think we can both agree.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, I think where it does shine is its presentation of the 50s culture, where they have
Mhm.
sort of like bar fights and Shia LaBeouf like slicking his hair back.
Yeah,
But the one just sad thing to me is that like in the 1950s, like the car race that we see at the start was probably just the highlight of their life, honestly. And
I
that's just
know,
sad
I
because
know.
they're living in 1950s America, so they're if you're under 21 you can't drink anyway, and if you're and you have like some black and white TV. Ooh, yay. Like
Yeah,
you have good music, and you can go to a diner, but there's obviously a lot of like uh the culture wasn't all great, obviously.
great point.
And it just it doesn't seem like it was a great time to live.
It's a great point. It's a great point. And you mentioned the character of Shia LaBeouf plays Mutt Williams, and I think he's a fantastic addition. It is sort of like a short round 2.0 in many ways, but I think even like Shia LaBeouf, he looks like a young Harrison Ford, and I think he's I've grown up with him in my childhood with the Transformers films, and I think he's one of the most underrated actors in the last 20 years. I actually think he's actually very really talented, and I think he has one of the best line deliveries that I've ever seen. Like he's so like sarcastically funny.
Yeah, I mean, this is probably the hottest take that we've had in this episode, but I'm genuinely confused because I see him appear on like lists of like worst original characters of the 2000s, or like worst introductions to a franchise.
Yeah,
But I think he's great.
I think he's
I
good.
think he's because I mean, like sort of the often like these films like try and feel like in their last film to introduce like a younger version of the main character so that they can try to like artificially continue the franchise. And I don't think this is a like franchise character carrying character. I don't think they could have made Indiana Jones 5 Mutt Williams edition.
Yeah,
I don't think he could
yeah,
have carried this franchise on. But I do think it ushers in like a new generation of fans because they're
yeah.
brought in by the films of his that they're a fan of, and they introduce him the younger audiences to this great actor and to this great franchise.
Absolutely,
So
buddy.
so I genuinely had like not one issue with that character
Me
at
neither, man.
all.
And I think he's pretty like cool. Like he strolls in a 1950s Harley Davidson. I thought that was cool. And also like like you said perfectly, Callum. The film is perfect in our opinions for like getting the younger fans in as well, but also recapturing the magic for older fans. It links in that Mutt is the illegitimate son of Marion and Indy, so that provides a sort of a ladder there to bridge connectivity, and also Marion is back herself, from first time since Raiders. So I think there's a lot to be happy about here.
Yeah, and sort of the initial plans for Marion was like originally this film wasn't called Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. It was called Saucer Men from Mars, which they like name drop whenever he's like mocking the idea of aliens. So that was the initial name for the film. Well, it was a script that was proposed and then eventually binned. So I guess their intention was always to use aliens, and then they had people pitching scripts. And there was this character called like Dr. Elaine something. Like I didn't write it down, but it was a character that would be introduced in this film, and then Indiana Jones would marry her. So they would
Right.
be having him like instead of marrying Marion as he does at the end of this film, he would have just been marrying a new character, and I think I would have despised that, because there would be no context to that relationship. I think you need to see more of this character. I think either if in like if you make one good film, like, if you introduce Marion and Indiana Jones and Raiders of the Lost Ark, and they marry at the end of that film,
Hmm.
that there's a sort of payoff there because this is the introduction of all of those characters. So, we've seen them as long as they've existed
Yeah.
in our minds. But, if we've seen 3 films of Indiana Jones, none of which where he's been dating or even met this woman, Dr. Elaine, and then the big payoff of the franchise is
Yeah.
that he marries her instead
Yeah.
of other
That'd be
characters that were
screen.
introduced earlier and have had a bigger impact on his life. I would have despised that.
Absolutely, buddy. And yeah, especially if we're gonna have both his son and Marion in the film, it would be a weird one, man. It certainly would.
Yeah, I think it was that he would marry this woman. I think that that script probably didn't include Mutt Williams. It was probably
Yeah.
a different idea for a sidekick. But I know that had that Dr. Elaine character, and then Marion would like attend his wedding, and so would Short Round. So
Hmm.
that like they had a couple of returning characters that would like cameo at the wedding. But that was binned. But I would have loved to see Short Round at the wedding that does take place in this film, because
Absolutely.
I think we need to see that character again.
I think a short round standalone film in a similar vein to like no, I'm serious, like a Han Solo film or a Rogue One. I think a short round standalone film would do okay. Like it would make about, I think it would make around like 300 million. It wouldn't go like 700 or 800, but I think it would do okay.
300 million.
Yeah. Yeah, I think short round the movie has potential.
But like, is he like an 8-year-old like unknown actor, and it's like him on the streets like hustling people in Shanghai before he meets Indiana
I
Jones, and
think
then it
age
like
him up.
ends with him like picking his pocket, and then they meet. Is
I
is
think
that
age
is
him
that how
up.
you would structure it?
Well, you
Age
can
him
either do
up?
that, you can either do that and then cross over with Dora, which would be amazing, or like age him up, age him up.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting. I think you could sort of like intersperse like things of. I mean, we're talking. This is such a like. I'm sorry, this is a dumb idea. We can do like Indiana Jones film pitches one day, but like I guess if you did do a short run film, like you could sort of like intersperse like flashbacks of him in Shanghai being like a hustling kid, and then sort of something he does. Like you could sort of do it like the kind of like in Birds of Prey, where like Cassandra Cain like steals the diamond, and then that
Yeah,
like comes back to bite her because
yeah,
she's
yeah,
being chased by Black Mask. Maybe like a heist that he pulled, or like someone that he like pulled a fast one on, like when he was a child, like it
yeah.
comes back to haunt him as an adult, and then maybe he needs Indiana Jones's help.
I think he's an
I don't know,
interesting one.
that could be interesting.
I think he's a really interesting one, man.
Yeah, I mean, aside from the clunky dialogue, I did really like the character,
Yeah,
especially the actor. So
yeah,
I really want to see a return, and uh, I think it's only respectful to like if they do bring back this character for Indiana Jones 5, I think it's only respectful to cast the same actor. I don't think because like often is the case, with getting a child actor to play a character. Whenever that character gets huge popularity and then they bring them back for a later film, like more often than not, they just recast.
yeah.
Like for say like Terminator Rise of the Machines. They didn't wait a few years for like Edward Furlong to like age into the character of John
Thank God.
Connor. They just yeah, thank God. But like a lot of people like that character. I fucking hate Edward Furlong as John Connor. But
Yeah,
like they just cast Nick Stahl despite how iconic uh you know how iconic Edward Furlong was. So if they ever brought Short Round back, I think it's only respectful to have that actor rather
yeah,
than just getting like an A-list talent to play the aged up version, because I
absolutely,
think that's a bit disrespectful.
absolutely, man. And also, like that actor's probably like Harrison Ford's age when he did the first Indiana Jones, so he could probably pull it off.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah, just make sure that you make the time jump appropriate.
Yeah,
To how they actually look, and yeah, I think that'd work. I mean, obviously, like they're not giving Short Round his own film, but I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility to bring him back, because obviously we can talk a little bit about Indiana Jones 5 now, I guess,
yeah,
because this film sort of presents an aging Indiana Jones who can't do things as well. But I feel like by the time 2022 rolls around, we'll be really stretching our like our belief in this character. That he can perform all these physical stunts. I think the
Harrison
suspension
Ford,
of
yeah.
disbelief
I mean, yeah.
will be large.
Hmm.
Yeah, definitely.
He broke his leg, didn't he,
Yeah, like
doing Force Awakens? So he probably wouldn't want to do any more stunts.
yeah, his like foot closed on a door or something, or like someone dropped the
Jeez.
door on his foot. So yeah, he is probably adverse to doing hugely action heavy sequences. But I don't even remember what I was saying. But sort of the idea that they bring back, this is definitely going to be the last Indiana Jones film. Like, I don't think they're going to be pushing their luck with a Harrison Ford led Indiana Jones film, past number 5. So I think that they'll probably do, I think they'll probably do their best to like bring back fan favorite characters and give as much closure as possible.
Do you
So
think?
I think having Short Round back would be a good idea.
Do you think is Harrison Ford confirmed to be back for 5, or is it going to be recast as a younger one?
Yeah, it's 100% Harrison Ford, and I think he said like whenever people were talking about the idea of maybe casting like Chris Pratt or Bradley Cooper as a young Harrison Ford, I think as a young Indiana Jones, I think Harrison Ford was a bit like, go fuck yourselves, like I think he really, well, I mean, it's sort of weird because I think he wants to be the only one playing this character, but he also seems to hate playing like his popular characters. Like whenever he was
Yeah,
brought back as Harrison Ford, sorry, as Han Solo, he was like,
yeah,
"Please kill me! Like I'm so
yeah,
desperate. Like please kill this character so people keep." Because we sort of talked about the idea of in your own head canon, like the universe like continues however you want. So like
yeah,
that's why I didn't really like the sequel trilogy to Star Wars, because it's sort of like it gave definitive answers. They were like, oh no, like Han Solo and Leia didn't go on to live a happy life together. He was murdered by his son. So that
yeah,
sort of gives you a definitive ending. But also that was probably a good thing for Harrison Ford, because I think he was like, please just kill me so people stop asking me like what Han Solo went on to do. Because
yeah.
there are a lot of like tie-in novels and comics and stuff. So I think people were like, oh, when did Han Solo do this? And like, what kind of life did he lead with Leia? And then he's just like, shut the fuck up, he died. Like
Yeah.
he's probably glad of that.
Yeah, but Harrison Ford is like mid 70s now. I could swear, and also like it's gonna be really, like you said, buddy. It's gonna be hard to convince the audience that he can do the action scenes. Like imagine just him in a wheelchair with just like a lasso. That'll be. How's he gonna do it? Like it's gonna.
Yeah, because I mean, there was such a negative audience reaction to Mutt Williams, despite our liking of the character. A lot of people despise the character, so I don't think. I mean, he may not even be in Indiana Jones 5. I think that they'll probably just be going like, I think this will definitely be the last Indiana Jones film. So I think it'll be just fan service. Like trying to pay off everything, bring back fan favorite characters. So I think they'll probably just say like either Marion's dead and Mutt Williams is like somewhere else, or I mean, I guess they could just have them as a happy family. But I don't think that Indiana Jones is going to work as like a married guy who's
Yeah.
got a kid. Like despite obviously you can still be an adventurer and go on adventures either with or without your wife whilst being married to her. I just don't think that they're going to commit to that. I think that they're probably going to kill her off and probably just not include Mutt Williams and
Yeah.
just
Like
like do
as
as
a.
much fan service as possible.
That's a great point, buddy. And like I have one question for you. Like say after 5 they recast the character and have like prequel films sort of set at the time of Raiders or Temple of Doom or Last Crusade, who would you want to see as a young Indy?
Well, what I would definitely do if I were in their position, if you want to continue doing Indiana Jones films, you obviously can't have Harrison Ford. What I would do is set them, because you sort of said, he sort of offhandedly mentions a lot of adventures in this film that we don't need to see on screen. We
Yeah.
don't need to see those on screen, but I would love to see even a war film starring Indiana Jones,
Oh yeah.
set during, either like, I don't know, like the Korean War or the Vietnam War. Like I don't think it explicitly says which ones he served in, and obviously some of those are after the events of this film. Uh, you know, I would kind of like a war film starring it's not Harrison Ford though, like starring Indiana Jones. So you need to find someone that's like even older than him, uh, you know, who like even older than he was in the Last Crusade, so that you can set it between the Last Crusade and Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. And I don't know that I know someone that old at that point that would look like Harrison Ford at that age, because I feel like you can get a lot of actors that look like the young version of them, but you probably can't get, like, I feel like a lot of, every adult is incredibly distinct, so I don't know if you can find an actor that looks close enough like him that it's convincing,
Like a
that's
middle-aged
also
sort
that
of.
age.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, maybe if you waited like 10 years and then did it with like Chris Pratt, I could maybe be convinced.
I would say like I really, even if they didn't set it between Last Crusade and Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, I think if they just did it like a young indie, like Chris Pratt would be good. I don't know. I haven't seen this talked about, but I think Zachary Quinto. I'd like to see him as Indy.
Oh, that's a fair shot actually.
Like Zachary
Zachary
Quinto.
Quinto is in like Spock from Star Trek.
Yeah, yeah. I'd like to see him there.
Yeah, that's interesting because like he doesn't really have the physical comparison to Harrison Ford, but I think he definitely has a huge amount of charisma. I think he could definitely be the character because I don't think you have to be Harrison Ford to be Indiana Jones. Like, I'm not saying like do like a James Bond situation where you're like, switching people in and out and saying it's like not the same character. Like I think it needs to be the same character unless, you create like a huge, decades long spanning franchise like James Bond.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can replace him, but yeah, I guess they don't need to be a Harrison Ford lookalike because I mean Alden Ehrenreich isn't a Harrison Ford lookalike. He actually doesn't look anything like Harrison Ford, and he quite convincingly played the same character. You just have to suspend your disbelief, I guess.
Yeah. That's a good point, buddy. That's a good point. Have you got any other points about the film?
Well, we've barely talked about the film. Like
Good
I would
point.
say we've talked about literally like everything around the film, but not actually about the film. So I would say like literally my second, like we have got through like one of my points.
Go for it, lad.
But yeah, I would say that Kate Blanchett's, what where do they say Ukrainian accent is it's rough.
It's rough, yeah, and I actually quite like Kate Blanchett, but
Oh, I think she's great. Yeah.
yeah, but her accent's not great.
No, I mean, Family Guy makes this weird joke where they say like, is Kate Blanchett a good actress, or is she just tall, or is Kate Blanchett pretty, or is she just tall? Like they make these jokes as though she's not a good actress, and I feel like she doesn't get the respect that she deserves. But I love Kate Blanchett, especially in Thor Ragnarok.
Yeah,
Uh, but yeah, she is hindered by the accent, and I don't think that's her fault because obviously, you can't play the character without the accent. So she's just making the best of a situation where she has to be doing that accent. It's just that it does not come across well.
yeah, it's a great point, buddy. It's a great point.
Yes, so I would say that the most mocked scene in this film is where the nuclear explosion occurs and Indiana Jones hides in a fridge, and it is horrifically dumb. Let's be honest, because it sort of like it tries to get away with it by like zooming in on like where it says lead lined fridge, so maybe it would protect if it was like airtight, like proper, a watertight seal, maybe it would protect you somewhat from the radiation, but
Yeah,
surely it would just like surely if the explosion is like blowing up televisions and blowing up people's heads, how is it not just blowing up the fridge? Like I
exactly.
kind of get if it's lead lined, fair enough. It might protect you from radiation, but how is it not blowing up? Like lead isn't like the strongest metal.
Yeah, and that scene has been parodied in a video game, Fallout 4, where like there's a nuclear explosion in that film, and a little kid goes into the fridge, and like he's like locked in the fridge for like hundreds of years, but he is like mutated into like a ghoul, so he's like it's sort of it's mocked there as well, which is interesting, and yeah, I do agree. Although saying that, I quite like the nuclear sort of testing town. I think it looks really cool with like the dummies and stuff. I like that. Reminded me of like
Yeah,
a Call of Duty map called Nuketown. It's very similar to that.
yeah, and it was really like color wise very vibrant, and it felt like a real town. And then I was sort of because I had no idea at what point in the film that scene occurred. I was obviously waiting for it to happen, but
Yeah,
I didn't realize it happened so early on. So I was sort of taken aback when he discovered like this town full of mannequins. So it did sort of take me by surprise, and I really enjoyed the site itself.
absolutely, buddy.
So I think that this film is another big example, and we've sort of talked about this with Edge of Tomorrow, where one character is, willing to believe this really weird, baffling thing, but not
Yeah,
another. In Edge of Tomorrow it was the general, believed in the aliens, but he refused to believe in time travel. And in this situation, it's that Indiana Jones is willing to believe in, like religious, face melting artifacts like the Ark of the Covenant, but he refused to believe in aliens.
I
And
know.
it's just bizarre.
I've seen a lot of people criticize how like Aliens doesn't feel like Indiana Jones, and I can empathize with that. It doesn't feel like Indiana Jones, but in some instances, like how far can you go with a franchise when it's like an artifact, which is the MacGuffin of the film? Like you can't really go further than like a new artifact every film, otherwise it just gets repetitive. We've seen in the first film it's like Ark of the Covenant. Second film it's like a cult sort of direction, and then the third film it's more of like a religious theme. I think there's not much
Yeah,
avenues you can go down other than aliens, so I don't really blame the filmmakers too much.
yeah, and I mean we can talk about this now because it's sort of relevant to what you just said. Uh, I think the aliens are completely relevant, and I'll ask you this question: do you think that with the introduction of aliens, they're called here interdimensional beings, and the character played by John Hurt, you know, eh, Ox like Oxen or Oxley, the character played by John Hurt, he calls them interdimensional beings and says, that they go to a different dimension. But I mean, like, what the fuck does he know? They may well just be aliens who
Yeah,
are portaling to their planet, which is still in our solar system. So
yeah.
like, the fuck does he know? But my question is, with the introduction of what I'm going to call aliens, do you think that this uh, retroactively establishes the once thought religious artifacts as alien artifacts? Because we sort of see, people have
Mm.
tenuously linked like certain films like Star Wars, Indiana Jones, Alien, Predator. Those films are by a lot of people considered in the same universe. That's because a lot of those are, like Alien and Predator are obviously connected because they have that film Alien versus Predator. Then like there's references to the Predator, and there's like a Predator skull in Indiana Jones, like in one of those films at some point. And there's hieroglyphics that have C3PO and R2D2 on one of the walls in hieroglyphics in one of the films.
Mhm.
So you know in Prometheus, which is one of the films of the Aliens franchise, uh, there are these characters called the engineers, I believe, and they're like an alien race that go and like build civilizations. I guess I haven't seen the film, but that's what I've sort of gleaned. So in that film, it's established that, or it was retroactively established by the director, either which I haven't seen the film, that Jesus was actually one of these engineers, and he was
Okay.
actually an alien who went to Earth and like built the human civilization. So if that sort of logic is applied to this film, that you know humanity was actually created as an experiment of creation of civilization by aliens, do you think that, like, this is a very stupid theory, but like
No, it's
it's still
not. It's not.
possible that
Yeah.
all of the artifacts that we've seen that have some sort of significance, that they're actually, instead of being considered religious artifacts, they are indeed religious artifacts, but alien influenced?
I like that. I like that alien influence religious artifacts because I feel like with the religious artifacts and stuff, it grounds the film in reality a lot more because you can imagine those sort of adventures happening in real life. But no,
Yeah,
I like the way I like the like Jesus theory, if we're gonna call it that.
yeah.
I like it. What
Because
about
like
you?
I'm not commenting on religion. I'm just talking about in the context of this universe. It's
Yeah. No, I
it's
know. Yeah, yeah.
possible that divine, like what's considered like divine miracles, or uh like huge miracles are actually how in Thor they say that magic is just science that humans don't understand. It
Yeah.
might be that what we see as miracles is just normal nature for these aliens, and
Hmm.
the artifacts that they left behind are just you know alien technology.
Yeah, I like that, buddy. That's a really interesting one, and that's why I think there is potential for more here with this theme. So I'm looking forward to Indiana Jones 5 to see if it explores it.
Yes, and I'm just looking for what are yes. So uh, in this film, we're introduced early on to this character of Mac that we've never seen before,
Hmm.
and that's why I've sort of talked about like the in betweequel idea, because then you can sort of add context to this film by introducing that character in that film.
Yeah.
But this character of Mac, he betrays Indy early on, and then says later on, "Oh, I didn't betray you. I'm a double agent. I work for the CIA," and they just take him on face value. And then they sort of see that, we see like someone has been dropping like these red tracers, for the Soviets to follow.
Yeah.
And we thought, in my mind, I was like, oh, surely it's too obvious that, he's just going to betray them again. So I thought that secretly it was going to be that Oxley was working with the Soviets
Yeah.
and that he was putting on
Hmm.
this performance.
Hmm.
But it turns out not, and it turns out that it was just Mac betraying them again. And then like Indiana Jones is like, what, are you a triple agent? And he's like, nah, I just lied before. And I'm like, yeah,
Yeah.
obviously he just lied before. Like,
Don't
India,
take him
you
at face
fucking idiot.
value.
Like,
Yeah.
like this guy literally pointed a gun at you with the Soviets. Like, that's not what a CIA agent does. Like,
Yeah. It's a good
because if
point.
you were a CIA agent, you wouldn't like pretend to be an American operative, betraying America. You
Yeah.
would just put on a Russian or a Ukrainian accent and pretend to be one of them and then infiltrate them. You wouldn't
Yeah.
pretend to be an American who's betrayed his country, because then they'd be like, oh well, you could very easily be a spy. So
Exactly.
obviously he doesn't work for the CIA, and then he's just tricked again. Like, Indiana Jones is an idiot quite often. Like,
Yeah.
like for a
Old age.
historian who is betrayed in every single film, you would think that he wouldn't trust anyone at this point, but he blindly trusts people that have already betrayed him.
I know, and it is such a classic Indiana Jones cliche, isn't it, that someone betrays him? So it does get a bit silly at this point.
Yeah, definitely. And sort of to talk about the ending of the film, we've mentioned his marriage to Marion, and Mutt Williams seems like quite pissed off about it. Like he has a very stoic, like kind of like displeased face,
Yeah.
as they're saying their vows. And sort of a gust of wind brings the hat towards him, and I really thought they were going to go for it with him putting the hat on, and then like being like, oh, and he's going to lead the next Indiana Jones film, and then Indiana Jones
And
like
he's
took
just
the
like,
fuck
nope.
away from that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was so happy with that. I was really glad that they didn't like pander to the audience, and like the idea of like the game is on, where you're like sort of like winking to the audience about what's going to happen in the next film.
Yeah.
I'm glad that they didn't do that, and they subverted that by saying, nah, Indiana Jones is the only Indiana Jones there's ever going to be.
That's what I thought they were trying to do with The Dark Knight Rises with Robin in that film, and I'm sort of sad that they didn't have a Joseph Gordon-Levitt solo Robin film. I thought that would have been amazing, especially Christopher Nolan directed. So yeah, it's sort of similar vibes I got there from those two movies.
Yeah, I guess in that film especially, that was meant to be the end of the trilogy. Like, there was never any intention for that. They were just saying, after Batman is allegedly or possibly actually dead. We'll talk about that when we talk about the Dark Knight trilogy.
Absolutely,
Uh,
we'll have Jack on for that.
his legacy continues on, and the Robin Blake, played by Joseph Gordon-Levitt, actually becomes Batman or becomes this version's Nightwing. Regardless, I'm glad that's not what they did here,
Yeah.
because I thought it would have been very easy for them to do that, and then like, because this wasn't actually meant to be the last film in the series, I don't think. I think if this had performed well critically and financially, it performed well financially but not critically. I think if it had been like a critical hit, I think they would have done a fifth one in like 2011 or something.
Yeah.
And maybe, I don't know. Do you think Mutt Williams would have led that film if that was the proposed sequel? Like, if
I
people
think
hadn't
so
hated
because
that character?
2011 was still like peak Shia LaBeouf's career with Transformers 3, so I think they would have had Mutt Williams lead that. But now I think Shia LaBeouf's career is sort of, it's not in a great place right now, which is sad because I really like him. Uh,
Yeah,
and you've seen him in a film, Peanut Butter Falcon, and you love that, right?
I was gonna say, like, often, and I usually mean this quite seriously, just because I don't really remember a lot of films I see in the cinema. Anytime anybody says like, "Oh, Callum, did you seriously like Dora and the Lost City of Gold?" I say it's the best film of last year, and then I remember the fact that I saw Peanut Butter Falcon, and admittedly, it is a better film. You know, I I I, sh-
Yeah,
I unfortunately have to admit it's a better film than Dora and the Lost City of Gold. But
still
he's
both good.
he's an incredible actor. He's
Yeah.
a strange guy, but he's an incredible actor. He's full of charm and charisma. So I really want to see him again. I don't want to see him lead an Indiana Jones franchise film as Mutt Williams, but I
Yeah.
want to see him again, and I hope that they don't just bin the character because a lot of people hated him.
Me too, man. Me too. I don't have anything else to say about the film, buddy. Anything from you?
Well, I mean, I would say that this film is objectively the dumbest. It's like,
Yeah.
fuck it, nuclear explosion in a fridge,
Yeah.
aliens. It's
Yeah.
like, it's the least intellectually complex, but I think it's the most fun I had with one of these. It's
Mm.
not. I'm not going to claim it's the best film or the smartest film, but I think it was the most fun.
It's a great point, buddy. Yeah, I agree with you. It's up there with Temple of Doom for me with enjoyment.
Yeah,
So, I don't have anything else to say, man. Anything else?
just that like people like I would say the biggest criticisms this film received were Mutt Williams and the
Yeah,
CGI and the pacing of the film. But I think the pacing's perfect. Like I think it's I think it moves quite quickly. It's really fun. I never felt like I had to force myself to watch Raiders of the Lost Ark. I really enjoyed watching it, but I had to force myself to start it. After watching the first three films, I was excited to watch this, and I was excited
Mhm.
as I was watching it. I sort of didn't want it to end because I was comfortable like sitting in this universe with these
Yeah.
characters. So I really enjoyed it. So I really like to hear your rating of the film, Matthew.
So for me, buddy, I had a great time with this, and like we sort of said, this film is quite underrated. I think we both appreciated it, and we'd like to see another one. And I'm a huge fan of the pacing. I think Mutt Williams is a fantastic addition in a similar vein to how Short Round was in Temple of Doom. And I would give it an 8 out of 10. What about you, buddy?
Yes. So I think I had the most fun with this. I'm not going to claim it's the best. I do think that Last Crusade and Raiders of the Lost Ark are the peak of this franchise. I don't think any of them are perfect. Or I didn't give a 10 out of 10 in this situation to any of the films. But I had fun with every single one in this franchise, which is rare, honestly.
Yeah.
Because Back to the Future, even I was a little dubious of part two, but I loved every film in this franchise. It was a great experience watching it. I'm glad I did it, and I had a huge amount of fun. I will also give it an 8 out of 10.
That's great, buddy. This has been one of my favorite podcasts just because we've gotten to such an in-depth chat about four awesome movies in our opinion. So I had a blast today.
Yeah, I had a great time, and I think we had some solid ideas for the sequel. I mean, we're not exactly influencing the Hollywood big wigs.
Not
But
yet.
if you guys have any wishes or thoughts of what you want to
Yeah,
see in Indiana Jones 5, leave them below. We'd love to
absolutely.
talk to you about those. But it was it was great speaking about these films today. Did you
Absolutely,
want to
man.
go into the next few upcoming episodes?
Yeah, man, you crack on. What movies are we going to talk about in episodes to come?
Well, our next episode that we'll be discussing will be Disney Part 4, or is
Yeah,
it? Yeah,
part
yeah,
four,
Part
yeah.
4. And we're watching some absolute big hitters. So
Bangers,
some ones
man.
that I'm finally actually excited to do this episode because every Disney episode that we've done, it's been like a painful endurance.
Yeah.
I've subjected us to this, but I've never felt like more angry at someone than I have at myself. I'm like, fucking Fantasia, Melody Time, like fun and fancy free. Like there have been some really painful ones, and I'm hoping that's alleviated this week because Alice in Wonderland, Peter Pan, Lady and the Tramp, and Sleeping Beauty. So four films. I haven't
Bangers.
seen any of them, but I am really really looking forward to them.
Me too, man. And what's going to be our next episode after Disney Part 4? So coming later next week.
Well, we've covered a lot of franchises recently. So I mean, I thought it was maybe right to take it back to talking about a theme. So I was considering us talking about maybe prison films or British crime films or classic American maybe. If you had a preference of any of those, we can discuss that off pod.
Yeah,
But those were just some of the ideas for upcoming themes. If we don't cover one, next episode, it'll be in the near future certainly.
absolutely, buddy. Well, listen, it's been an absolute blast recording you today, buddy. This has been one of our longest ones, I think. So, yeah, it was a great discussion today, buddy. Thank you very much for introducing me to these films. And yeah, thank you to everyone who has watched. Please be sure to like, comment, subscribe. And yeah, as always, please be sure to do all that stuff. Email us at movieminutes@gmail.com and comment your thoughts on these films down below. We'd love to hear your opinions on this and perhaps Indiana Jones 5 as well. So yeah, thank you very much, Callum. Thanks everyone. Take care and bye-bye.
Bye.